Story 1. My boyfriend wanted an open relationship before marrying me just to test if I was worth it. I should have known something was wrong when he ordered the most expensive wine on the menu without even glancing at me first. But I was too busy being nervous thinking he might actually do it tonight. 5 years together, and here we were at this ridiculously fancy restaurant with candlelight and everything. My best friend had texted me 3 times that day asking if I thought tonight was the night. I'd bought a new dress, spent 2 hours getting ready, even practiced my surprise face in the mirror that morning, which in retrospect is absolutely humiliating to admit. The restaurant was one of those places where the menu doesn't have prices and the waiters wear actual tuxedos. I'd made the reservation myself 3 weeks ago after he'd casually mentioned wanting to go somewhere special for our 5-year anniversary. Special meant expensive, apparently, because he'd been dropping hints about this place for months. I didn't mind paying. I never minded paying. That was part of the problem, though I didn't see it yet. The waiter cleared our appetizer plates, and that's when he reached across the table and took my hand. My heart actually stopped for a second. This was it. 5 years of supporting him through his journey to find himself professionally. 5 years of telling him he was brilliant and talented and just needed the right opportunity. 5 years of footing the bill for almost everything while he figured out his career path. But none of that mattered because he loved me, right? He was finally ready to commit. I remember thinking about the ring I'd seen him looking at online last month. I'd pretended not to notice when he quickly closed the browser tab, but I'd been so happy, so hopeful, so stupid. "So I've been thinking," he started. And I could feel my face already forming that practiced smile. "About us, about our future." I squeezed his hand, probably too hard. My heart was hammering so loudly I was sure the entire restaurant could hear it. I felt like everyone was watching us. I wondered if people would clap when he proposed. Some people did that. "I want to marry you," he said, and for maybe 2 seconds my brain went completely blank with happiness before he continued. "But I need us to have an open relationship first." "I'm sorry, what?" The words didn't make sense. It was like he'd suddenly started speaking a different language. I heard them. I understood each individual word, but together they formed something my brain couldn't process. "I just think," he went on, apparently not noticing that I'd stopped breathing, that my hand had gone limp in his, that my entire world had just tilted sideways, that before I can fully commit to spending my life with just one person, I need to explore, you know? I need to experience other women, figure out what's out there. Then I'll know for sure that you're the one. I should have asked him why, if he needed to be sure. He hadn't figured that out before now, before 5 years, before this dinner that I'd planned and paid for, before making me hope. The waiter appeared with our entrees. I watched him set down my salmon like I was observing from outside my own body. The couple next to us had stopped pretending not to listen. "I've already thought this through," he continued, cutting into his steak that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "We can set boundaries, be respectful about it, but I really think this is what I need to be absolutely certain before we take that next step. Here's what I should have done. Thrown that expensive wine in his face, walked out, blocked his number, and never looked back. Here's what I actually did. I took a sip of water, set down my glass very carefully, and said, 'Okay.' His fork froze halfway to his mouth. 'Okay. Yes, open relationship. That sounds totally reasonable.' I watched him try to process this. He'd clearly expected tears, maybe a scene, definitely some begging. His entire face went through this fascinating journey of confusion, then relief, then something that might have been disappointment that I wasn't more upset. "You're sure?" he asked, almost suspicious now. "You're really okay with this?" "Absolutely," I lied, smiling so wide my face hurt. "If that's what you need, then that's what we'll do." What he didn't know, what he'd never bothered to notice in 5 entire years, was that I'd been keeping track of everything. Every dinner I'd paid for while he was between jobs. Every shopping trip where I'd casually handed over my card for his new wardrobe. Every vacation I'd funded while he was finding himself. I'd been doing it for so long that I'd actually started photographing receipts about 6 months earlier. Something my best friend had suggested when I confessed how much I'd been spending on him. She'd been warning me for months that something felt off about our dynamic, that I should keep records just in case. And here's the really messed up part. I'd spent 5 years building up his ego, telling him how attractive he was, how charming. I'd done it because he was so insecure when we first met, and I thought I was being a good partner by making him feel confident. Turns out I'd created a monster who genuinely believed his own hype. The rest of dinner was surreal. He actually seemed happy talking about how mature and evolved our relationship was, how this proved we were different from other couples, how he was lucky to have someone as understanding as me. I nodded and smiled and took mental notes while finishing my salmon that I could barely taste. When we got home that night, I went straight to my laptop while he was in the shower. I created a new folder on my cloud drive labeled Documentation and started uploading photos of every receipt I'd saved. Bank statements showing every charge to restaurants, clothing stores, that trip to the coast where I'd paid for everything. My hands were shaking, but I kept going. Some part of me knew I was going to need this later. The next morning, I woke up to find him already on his phone downloading multiple dating apps. He actually showed me his profile, asking if I thought his photos were good enough. "You look great," I told him, which was technically true but also irrelevant to what was about to happen to him. "I think I'll probably have matches within an hour," he said confidently, lying back on the bed that I'd paid for in the apartment that was in my name. "I mean, I've gotten pretty fit lately, right?" "Absolutely," I agreed, not mentioning that I'd been paying for his gym membership for 3 years. Within 2 days, his confidence had somehow multiplied. He'd bought an entire new wardrobe, all charged to credit cards that I'd later discover were maxed out. Designer shirts, expensive cologne, shoes that cost more than my car payment. He'd show me his phone screen constantly, pointing out matches and messages. "This one's a lawyer," he'd say, scrolling through photos like he was shopping. "This one says she loves guys who are ambitious. Oh, and look at this one. She's definitely into me." The first few days he was unstoppable. He'd come into the living room every hour with updates. "Just matched with someone who looks like a model. I think she's really into me based on her first message." I'd look at the message which just said, "Hey," and nod supportively. What else could I do? I'd started going to the pottery studio down the street. Something I'd wanted to do for years but never had time for because I was always working extra hours to pay for everything. The classes were twice a week in the evenings. Perfect timing for when he was presumably out on dates. The instructor was this patient woman in her 50s who had this philosophy about ceramics reflecting life. "You can't control everything," she'd say while we worked the clay. "Sometimes you just have to let it be what it wants to be." I found that oddly comforting, except he kept coming home early. Every single time. The first date he left at 7 o'clock with this swagger I'd never seen before, wearing a new shirt that had cost $180. He was back by 8:30, slamming the apartment door. "She was boring," he said, which I translated to mean she probably didn't laugh at his jokes or fawn over him, the way I always had. The second date he came home even earlier, looking genuinely shaken. She ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, finished half of it, said she had an emergency and left, he muttered. I didn't point out the irony of him being upset about someone else ordering expensive food. The third date was a disaster he couldn't stop talking about. She spent 20 minutes on her phone, he complained. Then she asked if I could cover her parking because she forgot her wallet. Who does that? Someone who saw through you in the first 5 minutes, I thought but didn't say. By the third week, I'd created 6 pieces at the pottery studio and had lost 5 pounds because I'd started going to the gym during lunch breaks. Turns out, when you're not spending all your free time boosting someone else's ego, you have a lot of extra energy for yourself and time. So much time that I'd somehow forgotten I had. The gym thing was an accident, really. My coworker had invited me to try her trainer's class and I'd figured, why not? That's where I met the instructor. This incredibly calm guy who treated everyone with genuine respect. He learned everyone's names by the second class. He never made anyone feel bad for being a beginner. After class one day, I was struggling with my water bottle cap. Stupid thing was stuck and he just casually helped me open it without making it into a thing. You're getting stronger, he'd said. And it took me a second to realize he meant from the workouts, not the water bottle incident. We'd ended up talking about books. I'd mentioned reading this novel about a woman who hiked the entire Pacific Crest Trail and his face had lit up. Turned out he'd done part of that trail 3 years ago. Then we talked about travel, about how sometimes you need to physically move through space to process things mentally, about life in general. Nothing romantic, just actual conversations where someone asked me questions and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. Questions like, what made you want to try ceramics? Instead of, what's for dinner? Or, can you check if my card went through? It was such a small thing. Being asked real questions and having someone remember your answers. But after 5 years of being someone's emotional support system and ATM machine, it felt revolutionary. Meanwhile, my boyfriend was becoming increasingly frantic. He'd check his phone every 30 seconds. He'd narrate his entire dating app experience like I was his therapist. Why aren't they responding? He'd ask. I mean, I'm being really interesting in my messages. I'd glance at his screen and see messages like, hey, beautiful, you up? Sent at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Real compelling stuff. One evening, I came home from pottery class to find him lying on the couch in the dark, just staring at the ceiling. How was your class? He asked, and there was something sharp in his voice. Great, actually. I'm working on this vase that's really coming together. That's nice. He sat up. Who else is in the class? Just a group of people. We're all beginners. Any guys? I looked at him. This person I'd supported for 5 years, who'd proposed marriage contingent on sleeping with other women first, and I felt something shift in my chest. Yeah, there are guys in the class. Why? Just curious. But his jaw was tight. You've been going there a lot. Twice a week, like I told you. And you're always coming home so happy. I sat down in the chair across from him, suddenly exhausted. Would you prefer I come home miserable? No, He ran his hands through his hair. Are you seeing someone? The audacity of this question, coming from someone who'd literally demanded an open relationship and had been on about a dozen dates in the past month, was so stunning that I actually laughed. Are you serious right now? It's different, he said, which was apparently his answer. I told you what I was doing. You're being secretive. I'm taking pottery classes and going to the gym. There's nothing secretive about it. But is there someone at the gym? There's the instructor and about 20 other people in the class. The instructor is a guy? Yes, the instructor is a man. We've talked a few times after class about books. That's it. His face did this thing where I could literally see him trying to figure out if he could be mad about this without being a complete hypocrite. He settled on sullen silence, which was somehow worse. The next morning, I had coffee with the instructor after class. His name didn't matter, really, but what mattered was that he paid for both our coffees without making it weird. Asked about my job, remembered details I'd mentioned the previous week, and didn't spend 45 minutes talking about himself. When I mentioned it casually to my boyfriend that evening, more to prove that I had nothing to hide, he actually threw his phone at the wall. So, you are seeing him? I had coffee with someone. You've been on 30-something dates in the last month. That's different. I told you I was going to do that. And I told you I was having coffee. What exactly is the problem here? But of course, he couldn't articulate it without revealing himself as the world's biggest hypocrite. So he just stormed off to the bedroom and slammed the door. I stood there in the living room, looking at his phone on the floor with a cracked screen, and started calculating in my head how much I'd spent on phone repairs for him over the years. For times, if I remembered correctly, probably close to $800 total. I picked up the phone to see if it still worked, and that's when I saw the messages. His screen was still unlocked, and there was a thread with someone named the blonde one, because apparently he didn't even bother learning their actual names, just categorized them like items in an inventory. The message was from her. Listen, I'm just going to be honest with you. You spent the entire date talking about your ex. Your card got declined at the restaurant. You showed up 20 minutes late, and then you tried to get me to drive you home because you took a ride share here and didn't have money for the return trip. I'm not interested. Please don't contact me again. My first thought was his card got declined. He told me that date went well. He'd said she was nice, but not his type. He'd never mentioned any of this. I should have put the phone down. I really should have, but I kept scrolling. There were so many similar messages. Different women, same patterns. It was like reading the same story over and over with slightly different character names. You said you were a project manager, but you spent the whole time complaining about not having a job and how your girlfriend doesn't understand you. Why did you think it was okay to ask me to pay for your drinks after you ordered the most expensive cocktails on the menu? I'm not your therapist. Dude, I came here for a date, not to hear about your relationship problems for 2 hours. You arrived late, left early, and spent the entire time checking your phone. What was even the point? Then I found the thread that made my blood stop. A woman he'd gone on 3 dates with. She'd sent him a long message explaining why she was ending things. But it was one specific paragraph that hit me. I want to be clear about something. When we tried to be intimate, you kept having issues and then blamed it on stress from your controlling girlfriend. But the thing is, you spent 3 dates telling me how amazing and supportive she is, how she pays for everything, how she always builds you up. So, which is it? Is she controlling or is she supporting you? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you have a good thing and you're sabotaging it while blaming her for your own problems. I hope you figure that out before you lose her. I read it 3 times. This stranger had seen in 3 dates what I'd been blind to for 5 years. Each message was like a tiny mirror reflecting back the person I'd enabled him to become. This entitled, self-absorbed person who thought the world owed him something, and I'd helped create that. I'd spent 5 years telling him he was wonderful just the way he was, that he didn't need to change, that someone would see his potential eventually. I'd paid for everything so he never had to face the consequences of not being able to afford his lifestyle. I'd propped up his ego so thoroughly that he genuinely believed he deserved better than me. But these women, strangers who owed him nothing, had seen through him immediately. I put the phone down very carefully on the coffee table, like it might explode if I moved too quickly. Then I sat there for what might have been 5 minutes or an hour. I honestly couldn't tell. My brain was doing this thing where it kept trying to rewrite the past 5 years with this new information. Every moment I'd thought was loving support was actually enabling. Every time I'd paid for something to help him out was actually preventing him from growing up. Every compliment I'd given him to boost his confidence had just inflated an ego that was already dangerously overblown. I went to my best friend's apartment and showed her everything. Not just the messages, but the receipts, the bank statements, everything I'd been quietly documenting. She made us both tea, even though neither of us was really a tea person. It was just something to do with our hands while we went through it all on her laptop. Okay, she said, opening a new spreadsheet. Let's actually calculate this properly. You've been saying it's a lot, but let's see the real number. We started with rent. 18 months where I'd covered his half completely, another year where I'd paid about 75% because he was getting back on his feet. $13,400, she said quietly, just in rent. Then we added the dinners, clothes, vacations, his car insurance when he said his policy lapsed, phone bills, the security deposit, the furniture. $32,150, she said finally. Her voice was quiet, almost reverent. You've spent $32,000 on him in 5 years. That can't be right. That's a car. That's a down payment on a house. We literally just calculated it. Twice. She turned the laptop screen toward me. I stared at the spreadsheet. The numbers blurred together. I could have paid off my student loans with that money. You could have done a lot of things with that money. You created a monster, my best friend said, not unkindly. She reached across and squeezed my hand. You spent 5 years telling him he was amazing, paying for everything, making him feel like he was hot stuff, and now he actually believes it. I did do that, didn't I? You did. But you did it because you loved him and you thought you were helping. The question is, what are you going to do now? What do I do? She looked at me for a long moment. You know what you do. I did know. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. Admitting it meant admitting I'd wasted 5 years. Admitting it meant I'd lied to myself as much as I'd lied to him. Admitting it meant starting over at 32 years old with nothing to show for half a decade but a spreadsheet of my own poor decisions and $32,000 I'd never see again. 3 weeks went by in this weird stalemate where we barely spoke to each other. He was still going on dates that all seemed to end in disaster. I was still going to pottery classes and the gym. The tension in the apartment was suffocating. Then one Saturday morning, I woke up to find him sitting at the kitchen table with this serious expression on his face. Not concerned about me serious. Concerned about him serious. The kind of face he made when he was about to ask me to cover another bill. "We need to talk," he announced, like he was the one who'd been wronged somehow, like he was the victim in this entire situation. "Okay." I poured myself coffee, taking my time. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I thought I'd be nervous, but I just felt tired, so incredibly tired. "I've been thinking and I've decided that I want to close the relationship again." I added cream to my coffee, stirred it, watched the white spiral into the black. "You've decided?" "Yes, I think I've explored enough. I'm ready to commit to you exclusively now." He said it like he was granting me some incredible favor. Like I should be grateful he was choosing me after test driving other options and finding them all wanting. "We can go back to how things were before." "How generous of you." "Don't be like that," he said. And there was an edge to his voice that I'd never heard before. Or maybe I'd heard it many times, but had trained myself not to notice. "I'm trying to fix this. I'm trying to make things right. We can go back to how things were before. Everything can be normal again." But that was the problem, wasn't it? Normal meant me paying for everything. Normal meant me building up his ego while mine crumbled. Normal meant me being grateful for breadcrumbs while he looked for a better meal. "Before you demanded an open relationship at our anniversary dinner," I asked, sitting down across from him. "That before. You agreed to it." His voice rose, and I saw our neighbor's silhouette pass by the window. These walls were too thin for this conversation, but I was past caring. "I did," I admitted, wrapping my hands around my coffee mug. The warmth helped somehow. "That was my mistake. But here's what's going to happen instead. I'm going to tell you something that you need to hear, and you're going to sit there and listen." He looked almost scared for a second, his eyes widening, but then his face hardened, that defensive wall coming up. "If this is about the gym guy, this isn't about anyone else. This is about you and me and 5 years of lies." I took a breath. This was it, the moment I burned down everything I'd built. "I lied to you for 5 years. I lied to you about almost everything that mattered." "What are you talking about?" "I told you that you were amazing in bed. You're not. I faked it so many times I lost count because I thought it would hurt your feelings to tell you the truth. I told you that you were brilliant and talented and just needed the right opportunity, but actually you're mediocre at your job and that's why you can't keep one. I told you that women must be falling all over themselves for you, but they're not, are they? I inflated your ego so much that you started believing in your own hype." His face had gone completely white. "You're just saying this to hurt me." "I'm saying this because it's true. I created this version of you that doesn't exist. I made you think you were this incredible catch so that you'd feel confident and happy. And what did you do with that confidence? You decided that I wasn't enough for you, that you needed to explore other options before committing to me. You said yes," he whispered. "You agreed to the open relationship. Because I wanted to see what would happen. I wanted to see if you'd actually succeed at finding all these women you thought were waiting for you. And you know what? You didn't. Because the person you think you are doesn't actually exist. I made him up." He stood up so fast his chair fell over. "You're a liar. You're manipulative. I have $32,000 in receipts that say I'm the one who's been manipulated." That stopped him. "What? $32,000. That's what I've spent on you over 5 years. Rent, food, clothes, vacations, your car, everything. I have documentation of all of it." "You kept track?" "What kind of person keeps track of?" "The kind of person who knew she might need proof one day." I stood up too, suddenly calm. "Here's what's going to happen. I want you out of this apartment. You have 45 days to find a new place and move out. During that time, you're going to pay me back $5,000 in installments. That's a fraction of what you actually owe me, but I'm being generous because I also contributed to this mess. You can't just kick me out. This apartment is in my name. I pay the rent. Check the lease if you don't believe me." He did go check, actually. I heard him in the bedroom rifling through the filing cabinet where I kept important documents. When he came back out, he looked shattered. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. You used me, he said, and there were actually tears in his eyes now. You made me think you loved me just so you could control me. No, I did love you. I loved you so much that I tried to build you up instead of letting you face reality. And look where that got us. He left that afternoon to stay with a friend. I changed the locks within 2 hours, not because I thought he'd do anything dangerous, but because I needed to feel safe in my own space. The next morning, I woke up to 17 text messages. Half were apologies, half were accusations. All of them were desperate. I didn't respond to any of them. My best friend came over that evening with wine and takeout. How are you holding up? Honestly, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years. Good. Because you know it's going to get worse before it gets better, right? She was right. She was so incredibly right. The formal agreement arrived at his temporary address 3 days later. 45 days to vacate, $5,000 to be paid in installments of $500 per month for 10 months. Itemized list of shared property to be divided. My best friend's cousin was a lawyer and had drawn it up pro bono as a favor. His response came via email, a rambling 3-page document about emotional manipulation, financial abuse, and how I destroyed his self-esteem on purpose. The lawyer cousin read it and said, "This is actually helpful. He's admitting to living in your apartment and benefiting from your financial support. Keep this." Then he showed up at my office. Just walked right into the lobby during lunch hour and started shouting my name. I was at my desk on the 4th floor when my coworker leaned over and said, Is someone screaming for you downstairs?" By the time I got to the lobby, security had already surrounded him, but he was still yelling. "I need to talk to her. She's ruining my life. Someone needs to make her listen to me." My boss was in the lobby too, along with approximately 30 of my coworkers who'd come down to see what the commotion was about. I'd never wanted to disappear more in my entire life. "Sir, you need to leave," the security guard was saying, hands out in that universal calm down gesture. "Not until she talks to me. She owes me that much." I stepped forward, keeping my distance but making myself visible. "I don't owe you anything. You need to leave." His face when he saw me, it was like watching someone drowning. Desperate, panicked, grasping for anything to hold on to. "Please, just 5 minutes. I just want to explain. I just want you to understand what you're doing to me. I understand perfectly. You need to go. You can't do this. You can't just throw away 5 years. You did that when you asked to sleep with other women before marrying me. Security, can you please escort him out?" They did, but not before he tried to shake them off twice and yelled a few choice words about me that echoed through the marble lobby. My boss called me into her office afterward, her face a mixture of concern and professional assessment. "Are you safe at home?" she asked directly. I showed her the agreement I'd drawn up, explained the situation as professionally as I could, tried to make it sound less horrifying than it was. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she sat back in her chair. "I'm issuing a formal company ban," she said. "He's not permitted on these premises under any circumstances. If he shows up again, we'll involve the police immediately, and I'm flagging this with HR. You might want to consider a restraining order." "I don't think it'll come to that." She looked at me with these knowing eyes like she'd seen this play out before. Famous last words. "Please be careful." That night I stayed at my best friend's apartment. At 2 o'clock in the morning, her building's intercom started buzzing. Every single unit, one after another. The doorman called up to say someone was pressing all the buttons and refusing to leave. My friend went downstairs and recorded him on her phone, just standing there in the lobby looking wild-eyed and frantic. "She's destroying my life," he was saying to the security guard. "She's trying to ruin me." The guard looked at the camera. "Sir, you need to leave or I'm calling the police." He left, but not before my friend got 3 minutes of video that her lawyer cousin said would be useful if we needed a restraining order. The credit card companies started calling. Apparently he'd listed me as an emergency contact on several accounts and he'd stopped paying everything. When they couldn't reach him, they called me. I informed each one that I was not responsible for his debts and had documentation proving we had separate finances. They were not happy about it. The mediator meeting was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Professional mediation, neutral location, the lawyer cousin present as my representative. I arrived 20 minutes early because I wanted to be settled and calm when he walked in. He showed up 30 minutes late wearing one of the designer shirts I'd bought him, looking flustered and unprepared. He didn't apologize for being late, just sat down heavily and immediately went on the offensive. "This is extortion," he said. "She's trying to blackmail me into paying money I don't have." The mediator, a woman in her 60s who looked like she'd seen everything twice, glanced at the documentation I'd provided. "You've been living in her apartment for 5 years? Our apartment. It's only in her name. She pays the full rent. According to these bank records, you've contributed approximately 12% of household expenses over that time period." The mediator looked at him over her reading glasses. "Is there anything in this documentation that's factually incorrect?" He shifted in his seat. "The percentages might be off. Were you aware of how much she was paying?" "I knew she paid for some stuff, but I didn't think she was keeping score." "This is documentation of financial transactions." The mediator tapped the papers. "You're currently unemployed. Where are you living?" "With my parents," I said quietly when he didn't answer. The mediator made a note. "Ms. Iris is requesting $5,000 in reimbursement to be paid over 20 months at $250 per month. Based on the documentation, she could pursue you for the full $32,000 in small claims court. This offer represents approximately 15% of what you actually owe. Do you understand that?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I can't afford $250 a month. Sir, I've been doing this for 18 years. What I'm seeing here is one person who financially supported another for 5 years, and that person now being upset about being asked to repay a small fraction of that support. You're taking her side. I'm looking at documentation. Bank statements don't take sides." She turned to me. "Are you willing to accept installments with consequences for missed payments?" "Yes. If he misses 2 consecutive payments, the full remaining balance becomes due immediately." His hands were shaking when he signed. I watched him form each letter of his name and felt absolutely nothing. 5 months later, I stood in my apartment and barely recognized it. I'd repainted every wall, donated or sold everything that reminded me of him, bought new furniture with my own money. Stuff that I actually liked instead of compromising on his taste. The pottery pieces from my classes were displayed on floating shelves I'd installed myself. The promotion had come through 2 months earlier, the one I'd been passed over for 3 times while I was with him. 60% salary increase, leadership role, my own team. My boss had told me she'd always thought I had potential, but that I'd seemed distracted the past few years. "You've really come into your own lately," she'd said. The payments from him arrived exactly on time every month, $500 like clockwork. I documented each one in a spreadsheet but felt no emotional reaction to seeing his name on the transactions. It was just data now, proof that this chapter was closing. Pottery classes had turned into something I genuinely loved. My pieces were still imperfect, wonky in places where the clay hadn't cooperated, but I'd learned to appreciate the flaws. The instructor had commented that my work showed more personality than the technically perfect pieces some students made. The gym had become routine, too. I'd lost 15 pounds without trying, just from the stress being gone and actually having time to take care of myself. The instructor and I had coffee regularly now, sometimes dinner. Nothing serious, nothing pressured, just 2 people who enjoyed each other's company. He paid for things without making it transactional. He asked about my day and remembered what I told him. When I talked, he listened instead of waiting for his turn to speak. The encounter happened on a random Tuesday at the supermarket, 3 months into my new life. I was comparing prices on pasta sauce. Actually comparing prices for the first time in forever because I was on a budget now. A real budget, not the fake kind where I pretended to care about money while spending thousands on someone else. Then I saw him 2 aisles over reading the label on a can of generic soup with the kind of intense concentration usually reserved for legal documents. He looked different, thinner, definitely. The kind of thin that comes from stress rather than intentional weight loss. tired, with circles under his eyes that I could see even from this distance. The designer clothes were gone, replaced with a t-shirt I didn't recognize and jeans that had seen better days. They were worn at the knees, frayed at the hem. For a man who used to spend $180 on a single shirt, this was practically a costume. He saw me at the same moment. For a second, we just stared at each other across the dried goods aisle, like two characters in a Western showdown. Other shoppers pushed their carts between us, oblivious to the heavy weight of 5 years hanging in the air. Then he put the soup can back on the shelf and started walking toward me, and every muscle in my body tensed. "Hey!" he said quietly when he reached me. His voice was different, too smaller somehow. "Can we talk? I don't think that's a good idea. Please, just 5 minutes. I need closure." There was something almost pitiful about him now, standing there clutching a wire basket with 3 items in it. Generic soup, store-brand bread, a single can of tuna. I remembered when he used to fill carts with imported cheeses and organic everything, never checking prices because I'd always just pay at the checkout. But I'd learned enough in therapy, which I'd started immediately after he moved out, to know that his need for closure wasn't my responsibility. "I'm good," I said simply. Turning back to my pasta sauce like this was a normal conversation with a normal acquaintance. "I hope you're doing okay, but I don't think we have anything to discuss. Everything fell apart because of you." It came out flat, almost matter-of-fact, like he was stating an obvious truth that I was somehow refusing to acknowledge. And there it was, the real reason he wanted to talk, not closure, blame. "I need to go," I said, starting to push my cart past him. "Wait, please." He grabbed my arm and I yanked it away so fast that my cart rolled into a display of canned tomatoes. "Don't touch me. I'm sorry, I didn't mean." He looked around at the other shoppers who were definitely watching now. "I just want you to understand what you did to me. I understand that you're still not taking responsibility for your own choices. That's all I need to know." I pulled out my phone. "If you don't leave me alone right now, I'm calling the police." He left. I watched him abandon his basket and walk out of the store, shoulders hunched like he was bracing against wind that only he could feel. At home that night, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello. Hi, this is his mother. I hope you don't mind me calling." I minded very much, actually, but I was too surprised to say so. "He's living with us again," she continued. "He lost his job about a month ago. He's not doing well, and all he talks about is you and how everything went wrong. I think he wants to try to work things out." "That's not going to happen." "I understand, I do. But maybe if you could just see him one more time, let him explain." "No. Please, as a mother, I'm asking you to. With all due respect, your son is a grown man who made his own choices. I spent 5 years supporting him financially and emotionally. And when that wasn't enough for him, he demanded an open relationship before he'd consider marrying me. I didn't destroy anything. He did." There was a long pause. "He told me you agreed to the open relationship." "I did agree because I wanted to see what would happen. And what happened was exactly what I suspected would happen." "I see." Another pause. "He never told me about the financial part, about how much you'd paid for." "I'm sure he didn't. I'm sorry for calling. I just thought maybe I could fix this for him. But I can see now that there's nothing to fix." She sounded tired. "For what it's worth, I think he knows he messed up. He's just too proud to admit it." After she hung up, I sat on my couch in my redecorated apartment with my pottery pieces catching the evening light and realized I didn't feel guilty at all. Maybe that made me cold. Maybe it made me self-protective. Either way, it felt like progress. 7 months after that anniversary dinner, I was setting up for a small dinner party when the doorbell started ringing. Not just ringing, leaning on it. The sound drilling into my skull like someone was testing my patience on purpose. I looked at my best friend, who was helping me arrange cheese on a board we'd spent 20 minutes making look Pinterest perfect, and she immediately pulled out her phone. "Don't open it until I'm ready to record," she said, her face dead serious. Through the peephole, I could see him. He was holding flowers, wilted carnations that looked like they'd been sitting in a gas station cooler for a week, and swaying slightly on his feet, drunk, very unmistakably drunk. His shirt was buttoned wrong, I noticed, and he'd cut his hair himself badly with chunks uneven around his ears. "I know you're in there," he shouted, loud enough that I heard one of my neighbor's doors open down the hall. "We need to talk. You can't just ignore me forever." "I'm calling the police," I called through the door, pulling out my phone with shaking hands. "You need to leave right now. I just need 5 minutes. Just let me explain everything. I can fix this." I opened my phone and dialed. The 911 operator answered immediately. Her voice was calm and professional, and I said very clearly, "My ex-boyfriend is at my door, intoxicated and refusing to leave. I need an officer here, please." I gave her my address, spelled out my apartment number twice. No one wanted me. He was shouting now, and I could hear him crying. This ugly, gasping sound that might have broken my heart 6 months ago. Every single woman I met, they all said no. "Do you know how that feels? Do you know what that's like? This is all your fault." My best friend was filming from the window now while 2 other friends huddled in the kitchen, wide-eyed and silent. One of them whispered, "Is he going to break down the door?" This was not how I'd envisioned my dinner party going. I'd made lasagna. I'd bought good wine. I cleaned for 3 hours. You took everything from me, my confidence, my family, my job, everything. All because I made one mistake. One mistake, and you turned everyone against me. "Sir," I heard a voice say, and I looked out the peephole again to see my neighbor, the older man from apartment C who'd always been kind to me. He was standing in his doorway in slippers and a cardigan. "You need to leave this young lady alone. This is between me and her. This is none of your business. The police are on their way. If I were you, I'd leave before they arrive. Public intoxication is a crime, you know." But he didn't leave. Of course he didn't leave. He just kept ringing the doorbell and pounding on the door and shouting about how I'd manipulated him, used him, destroyed him, how I'd turned his family against him, how his mother wouldn't even talk to him anymore because of what I'd said, how I'd stolen 5 years of his life and given him nothing but lies in return. When the police arrived 6 minutes later, I timed it, he started crying even harder and saying he just wanted to talk to me like adults. The officers separated him from my door, took statements from me and my neighbor, and issued him a formal warning. If he came back, they said I could get a restraining order with no problem. They walked him to his car, parked illegally in a fire lane, naturally, and watched him call a rideshare before letting him leave. After they left, I closed my door, locked it, engaged the chain, and just stood there breathing for a full minute. My friends were silent, waiting to see how I'd react. Would I cry? Would I be angry? Would I feel guilty? I felt relieved. That's what surprised me most. Not anger, not sadness, just pure relief that I wasn't tied to that chaos anymore. I wasn't responsible for his emotions or his choices or his failures. I was just responsible for me. "Are you okay?" my best friend asked. "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. "Let's eat." We had our dinner party. We drank wine. We laughed. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't spend any mental energy worrying about someone else's feelings. The 9th payment was 3 weeks late when the email arrived. It was long, rambling, full of justifications and excuses, but the core message was clear. He wanted to meet in person to renegotiate the agreement because he couldn't afford the payments anymore. I showed the email to the lawyer cousin, who snorted and took a sip of her coffee. "He means he wants you to forgive the debt. Classic manipulation tactic. Don't fall for it." "I won't. But maybe meeting him one more time isn't the worst idea. Get it over with. Make it clear this is the end. Draw that line in permanent marker. Just do it somewhere public with witnesses." So I agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory, lots of witnesses. I brought my best friend as backup, made her sit at a nearby table where she could intervene if needed, but far enough that he might not notice her immediately. I arrived 15 minutes early and ordered a coffee I probably wouldn't drink just to have something to do with my hands. The barista was playing indie music too loudly, and the whole place smelled like burnt espresso. He walked in looking like a different person. He'd lost at least 20 pounds, not in a healthy way. Gaunt, not fit, hollow-cheeked. The expensive clothes were long gone. He was wearing cheap sneakers and a hoodie I'd never seen before, gray and shapeless. But it was his eyes that really got me. This hollow looked like something vital had been scooped out of him and nothing had filled the space it left behind. He sat down across from me without ordering anything, without even asking if I wanted anything, and folded his hands on the table. They were shaking slightly. "Thanks for meeting me. You said you wanted to renegotiate, right? So, I've been struggling, really struggling. I lost my job 3 weeks ago. I'm living with my parents in their basement. They charge me rent now. Can you believe that? My own parents. And I just can't afford the $250 a month anymore on top of everything else. I was hoping we could work something out. Maybe reduce it to 100, or extend the timeline even more." "You signed an agreement." "I know, but that was before everything fell apart, before I lost everything. You don't understand what it's been like for me. You're doing fine. You got that promotion. You have your apartment, your life. I have nothing, nothing." His voice cracked on the last word. I took a sip of my lukewarm coffee and waited. I'd learned in therapy that silence was a powerful tool, that I didn't need to fill every gap in conversation with comfort or explanation. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone sit with their own discomfort. "Everyone left me," he continued, his voice rising slightly. "My friends don't want to hear about it anymore. My parents are disappointed in me. My mom actually said I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. Can you believe that? My own mother taking your side. Women won't even match with me on apps now. Do you know how humiliating that is? I imagine it's difficult." "Difficult?" He let out this bitter laugh. "It's destroying me. Every day I wake up and realize that everything I thought I had, everything I thought I was, it was all a lie. And you did that. You made me believe something that wasn't true. It's your fault." And there it was, the real reason for this meeting. "You lied to me for 5 years. You built me up just to tear me down. You made me think I was someone I wasn't. And then you showed me the truth in the cruelest way possible. You wanted me to fail. You wanted to humiliate me." I set down my coffee cup carefully. "You asked me to marry you contingent on you sleeping with other women first. You thought you deserved better than me. Those were your choices, not mine. Because you made me think I could. You made me believe I was special. You told me I was smart and talented and good-looking, and then you ripped it all away." "I did," I said. "That's true, and that was wrong of me. I should have been honest from the beginning instead of protecting your ego." I leaned forward slightly. "But what happened after that? That's all on you. You could have taken my honesty as a wake-up call to work on yourself. Instead, you've spent months blaming me for your own failures. You manipulated me financially. I supported you financially. I paid for things because I thought I was being a good partner. Yes, I should have stopped doing that years ago. But you were perfectly happy to let me pay for everything as long as you benefited from it. You turned my family against me. I've had one conversation with your mother where she called me asking if I'd take you back. I told her no. That's it." He was spiraling now. I could see it. His arguments getting more desperate and less coherent. "You stole my potential. I could have been successful if you hadn't made me dependent on you. If you hadn't made me think I was better than I am. You had 5 years of me paying your rent and hyping you up. If you were going to be successful, that would have been the perfect time to prove it. I want you to forgive the debt. I want you to admit that you manipulated me. I want you to take responsibility for what you did to my life." "No." "What?" "No to all of it. The debt stands. You have 48 hours to send the payment, or I'll file in small claims court for the entire amount you owe me, not just the agreed-upon 5,000. You can't be serious. I have never been more serious in my life. I supported you financially and emotionally for 5 years. I built you up when you were down. And when that wasn't enough for you, you asked for permission to cheat on me before committing. I'm done taking responsibility for your choices." His face went through this extraordinary series of expressions. Shock, rage, disbelief, and finally something that might have been grief. "You're a terrible person," he said quietly. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just done being manipulated by guilt. I hope you're happy with yourself. I actually am. That's what's really bothering you, isn't it? That I'm fine, that I moved on, that I'm not sitting around regretting what I did to poor you. He stood up so fast his chair tipped over. Several people in the coffee shop turned to look. You ruined everything, he shouted. You manipulated me. You lied to me. You stole years of my life. The barista started moving toward us, and I saw my best friend stand up at her table. But before anyone could intervene, I just sat there calmly and said, You have 48 hours. He called me a word that I won't repeat. Then another and another. The manager was already asking him to leave. A couple near the window was filming on their phone. He looked around at all these witnesses watching him have a complete meltdown and seemed to finally understand what was happening. He left. The manager came over to ask if I was okay. I assured him I was fine. My best friend joined me at the table and we sat there for a few minutes in silence. That was intense, she finally said. Yeah. You good. I thought about it, really thought about it. Was I good? This man I'd spent 5 years with had just called me horrible names in public and blamed me for every bad thing in his life. Shouldn't I feel guilty? Shouldn't I feel something? I'm good, I said, and realized I meant it completely. The payment arrived 24 hours later. 1 year after that anniversary dinner, I stood in front of the company's board of directors and presented the project I'd been leading for 8 months. The digital transformation initiative that would streamline 3 departments, save approximately $200,000 annually, and position us for expansion into new markets. I'd worked on this presentation for weeks, rehearsing in my apartment until I could recite it in my sleep, tweaking slides until they were perfect. My hands weren't shaking. That's what I noticed first. A year ago, I would have been trembling, second-guessing every word, wondering if I was good enough. But now, standing in front of 15 executives in expensive suits, I felt solid, grounded, sure of myself in a way I'd never been before. When I finished, there was this beat of silence that felt like an eternity, and then the CEO started clapping. Then everyone else joined in. Real applause, not the polite golf clap kind. After the meeting, she pulled me aside in the hallway, her heels clicking on the marble floor, and said the words I'd been waiting years to hear. We're creating a management position for you, Director of Digital Innovation. You've more than earned it. I called my best friend from my car in the parking garage and ugly cried for 10 minutes straight. Happy tears, relieved tears. I made it tears. That weekend was the Pottery Studios Community Showcase. Small event, local artists and students, nothing fancy. But they'd accepted 3 of my pieces for display, and that felt huge. I'd been working on them for months, experimenting with different glazes and techniques, learning to embrace the imperfections that came with being a beginner. One piece had this crack running through it that happened during firing, and instead of throwing it away, I'd filled it with gold leaf, turning the flaw into a feature. My friends came to the opening, coworkers came, the gym instructor came, bringing nice champagne and introducing me to the studio owner as the artist. Not as his girlfriend or his date, just as someone whose work he respected. And then, surprisingly, his mother walked in. I almost didn't recognize her at first. She was wearing a nice dress, carrying flowers, looking nervous. She approached me carefully like I might run away. I hope it's okay that I came, she said. My sister saw the event listed online and told me about it. It's fine. Your work is beautiful. She was looking at one of my vases, a lopsided thing with imperfect glazing that I'd almost not submitted. Really beautiful. Thank you. I wanted to apologize, she said quietly, for calling you that time, for putting that pressure on you, and for not realizing sooner what was really happening with my son. You don't need to apologize. I do, though. I raised him to think the world owed him something. I made excuses for him when he messed up. I blamed other people instead of making him face consequences. She touched the edge of my vase gently. He needs to fix himself. I see that now. And he can't do that if people keep rescuing him. We stood there for a moment. 2 women who'd both spent too much time trying to save someone who didn't want to be saved. How is he? I asked, surprising myself. He's in therapy. actually going to sessions and trying to work on himself. He got a job, not a great one, but he shows up every day. He's paying me rent. Small steps. She looked at me. He asked me to tell you he's sorry if I saw you, but he didn't ask me to tell you anything else. No messages, no requests, just sorry. Tell him I hope he figures things out. I will. She smiled sadly but genuinely. You deserved better than what he gave you. I'm glad you know that now. After she left, the instructor brought me a glass of the champagne he'd brought. Everything okay? Yeah, actually really okay. The exhibition continued. People looked at my work, asked questions, even bought one of my pieces. When I got home that night, I was riding this wave of accomplishment and peace that I'd never quite felt before. I started unpacking some boxes I'd been meaning to sort through for months. Stuff that had been shoved in the back of the closet during all the chaos of the breakup. Old tax documents, college textbooks I'd never look at again, random cables for electronics I no longer owned. In one box, buried under a stack of old magazines, I found a photo album I'd forgotten about. Leather-bound, expensive, something I'd bought 3 years ago, thinking I'd fill it with memories of us. I'd only managed to add photos from the first 2 years before I apparently gave up on the project. There we were, from years ago, young and hopeful and so convinced we were going to make it work. There was one from our first apartment, both of us holding champagne glasses and grinning at the camera. Another from a beach trip where we'd buried each other in sand. One from a concert where we were both sweaty and exhausted and happy. I looked at the girl in those photos. The one who thought love meant sacrificing everything, who thought supporting someone meant lying to them about reality, who thought making herself smaller would somehow make him bigger. She was smiling in every photo, but I could see it now, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes, the way she was always leaning toward him while he looked at the camera, the way she held herself like she was trying not to take up too much space. For a long time I'd felt guilty about that girl, guilty that I'd wasted her time, that I'd let her stay in a bad situation for so long, that I'd convinced her to dim her own light so someone else could feel like they were shining. I'd spent hours in therapy talking about her, crying for her, wishing I could go back and shake her and tell her to run. But looking at those photos now, all I felt was compassion. She'd done the best she could with what she knew at the time. She'd loved someone imperfectly, because nobody had ever taught her what healthy love looked like. She'd made mistakes, yes, but she'd also eventually found the courage to stop making them. And when she finally learned better, she'd done better. I closed the album and put it back in the box, not to hide it or forget about it, but just because I didn't need to look at it anymore. The story it told wasn't my story anymore. I was writing something new now, something where I was the main character instead of the supporting role in someone else's narrative. My phone buzzed on the counter. The group chat with my friends making plans for dinner next week. The gym instructor sending a funny article about pottery fails he thought I'd appreciate. My boss following up on something from the presentation with 3 fire emojis and, "You killed it." All these people who saw me for who I actually was, not who I was pretending to be. I pulled out my laptop and started looking at real estate listings. The apartment had been fine for recovering and rebuilding, but I was ready for something that was entirely mine. Something I chose without compromise. That reflected who I was now, not who I'd been. I wanted a place with good light for my pottery. Maybe a small balcony where I could have morning coffee. A space that felt like me, just me. Nobody else's energy lingering in the corners. The gym instructor and I were taking things slow. Really slow. For the first time in my life, I wasn't rushing into anything or trying to prove something. We had dinner sometimes, talked about real things, and there was no pressure to define what we were. It felt healthy, natural, like building something on an actual foundation instead of quicksand. A year ago, I'd sat across from someone who told me I wasn't enough for him unless he could sample other options first. I'd said yes because I wanted to see what would happen, because some part of me already knew what would happen. And what happened was that I learned exactly how much I was worth. Turns out it was a lot more than $32,000 and 5 years of my life. Turns out I'd always been enough. I just needed to believe it myself. The apartment search could wait until tomorrow. Tonight, I just sat there on my balcony, watched the city, and felt genuinely happy. Not the fake kind I'd performed for 5 years. Just real, simple contentment, and that was everything. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My stepmother demanded that I pay rent to live in my own house, while her children lived there for free. When I refused, she tried to convince my father to kick me out. But when I revealed the truth about who really owned the house, everything changed. Sandra's smile widened. Well then, you'll have to find another place to live, won't you? We can't have parasites in this house. I was sitting at the dining table, my food completely cold, as Sandra's words hung in the air. The injustice of it all, years of being treated like a servant while her children did nothing. And now this. Something inside me finally broke. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. James, who graduated college 2 years ago and spends his days playing video games, doesn't have to pay rent? Melissa, who's in her 3rd year of college and has never done a single chore in this house, doesn't have to pay rent either? But I do. I decided my children don't need to pay rent while they're getting established, Sandra replied, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. A strange calm washed over me. Maybe it was all those years of bottled-up frustration, or maybe it was simply time for the truth to come out. I felt a smile creep onto my face. Not the usual polite smile to keep the peace, but something different, something that made Sandra's own smile falter slightly. Well, that's interesting, I said, leaning back in my chair. I'm not going to pay rent because this house belongs to me. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, James started laughing, followed by Melissa's shrill giggle. Sandra laughed too, but there was a nervous edge to it. What are you talking about? She asked, still chuckling. This house is mine, I repeated, not breaking eye contact. The laughter faded as they processed my words. Sandra's face cycled through a range of emotions. Amusement, confusion, disbelief, and finally, something close to panic. That's ridiculous, she stammered, grabbing her phone. I'm calling your father right now. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped aggressively on the screen as she put the call on speaker. The ringing seemed to echo throughout the kitchen. Hello? My father's voice crackled through the speaker. David. Sandra's voice was tense, controlled. Ruby is telling some interesting stories about the house. She says the house belongs to her. That's not true, right? The silence on the other end dragged on for what felt like an eternity. When my father finally spoke, his voice was hesitant. Well, he cleared his throat. Actually, my in-laws put the house in Ruby's name before they passed away. You didn't think you should mention that? Sandra practically screamed. How could you not tell me this? I didn't think it was important, my father replied weakly. It never seemed relevant. Not relevant? Sandra's face turned red. Not relevant that your teenage daughter owns our house? She hung up before my father could respond, nearly slamming the phone onto the table. The kitchen fell into an uncomfortable silence, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. James and Melissa stared at me like they'd never seen me before. Sandra was breathing heavily, clearly trying to compose herself. When she finally spoke, her voice was artificially cheerful, but I could hear the slight tremor. Well, she forced a laugh that sounded more like a sob. This has been a big misunderstanding. Of course you don't need to pay rent, Ruby. Let's just forget this conversation. Okay? I had completely lost my appetite. Without saying a word, I stood up and went upstairs. As I climbed the stairs, I could hear hurried whispers from downstairs. Sandra's harsh tone mixed with James and Melissa's anxious voices. By 6 o'clock the next morning, I was already awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how much had changed in just a few hours. Around 7 o'clock, I heard movement downstairs, the familiar sound of Sandra making her morning coffee. I was about to go down for breakfast when I heard her voice. David, you need to do something about this situation, she said, her voice low but intense. Your daughter. Can't we just need to make her leave? I froze on the stairs, holding my breath. I know the house is hers. David? Sandra continued, frustration clear in her voice. But she's making things difficult. She doesn't fit here anymore. She's becoming a problem. There was a pause. Even from where I was, I could sense my father's hesitation. But Sandra, it's her house. I can't just kick her out. No one's talking about kicking her out. Sandra's voice turned sweet. That syrupy tone she used to manipulate. We just need to steer her in the right direction. What about those out-of-state colleges she applied to? You could encourage her to go to one of them. Tell her it'd be good for her independence. My stomach twisted when I heard my father's reluctant reply. Maybe you're right, he said slowly. I'll talk to her about moving out for college. It might be better for everyone. I waited until Sandra ended the call. Then I calmly walked into the kitchen, keeping my face neutral. I started pouring myself a bowl of cereal, pretending I hadn't heard anything. James and Melissa came in shortly after, both looking uncomfortable. Sandra was the last to enter, still holding the phone in her hand. "Good morning, everyone," she chirped, as if nothing had happened the night before. We all sat down. The only sounds were the crunching of cereal and the occasional clink of spoons against bowls. Then, as casually as if I were commenting on the weather, I said, "Oh, and starting next month, all of you will have to start paying rent." For a moment, the silence in the kitchen was so heavy I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Sandra stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. James and Melissa froze with their spoons midair, eyes wide, exchanging nervous glances. It was Sandra who broke the silence, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a sob. "You're joking, right?" she asked, her voice almost childlike, desperately trying to maintain control of the situation. "No, Sandra, I'm not joking." My voice was calm, but each word was filled with firmness. "You've been living here for free for years. It's time to contribute." She swallowed hard, trying to regain her composure. "That doesn't make sense. We're a family." "And we're not a family," I interrupted, my patience completely gone. "You made that very clear when you demanded I pay rent while your children lived here without lifting a finger. Now everyone will be treated the same." James scoffed, trying to appear indifferent, but his insecurity was obvious. "This is ridiculous. I'm not paying anything. Then you're free to find another place to live." I shot back, locking eyes with him. Melissa, who usually avoided confrontations, finally spoke up. "I'm still in college. How do you expect me to pay rent?" "Maybe you should have thought about that before spending money on parties and expensive clothes," I replied. "But don't worry, the rent will be fair. I can even help you find a job." Sandra finally snapped, slamming her hand on the table. "You've completely lost your mind. This house has always been a home for all of us. I won't let you turn it into some kind of ridiculous boarding house." I stared at her, unwavering. "Funny hearing that from you, Sandra. Because just yesterday I overheard you trying to convince my father to kick me out of my own house. And you thought I wouldn't find out." The color drained from her face, and for a moment she was speechless. Melissa looked like she was about to faint, and James stared at his plate as if he wanted to disappear. I was only trying to help you become more independent," Sandra stammered, attempting to mask her panic. "Oh, of course, independence. How kind of you to try to help me move out of the house my grandparents left me, while you and your children continue living here without paying a dime." She tried to speak, but I raised my hand to stop her. "Don't worry. I've already decided you'll all have formal contracts. If you want to keep living here, it will be on my terms." Sandra abruptly stood up, trying to maintain a sense of authority. "This is unacceptable. David would never allow this. Maybe you should call him again and ask what he thinks. Or better yet, ask what he'll do when I decide to kick everyone out and sell the house." The shock on her face was almost satisfying. She knew I had the power to do exactly that, and the thought clearly terrified her. That night, locked in my room, I could hear muffled murmurs and arguments coming from downstairs. Sandra was probably trying to come up with a plan to get around the situation, but what she didn't know was that I was more than ready to face her. The next day, I called for a meeting. Sandra tried to refuse, but I made it clear she had no choice. By 10 a.m., we were all seated in the living room. Sandra, James, and Melissa looked uncomfortable, while I sat calmly, confident. Here are the rental contracts, I said, handing each of them a copy. You have 1 month to decide if you want to stay. Sandra took the paper with trembling hands, and as she read, her face grew redder and redder. This is absurd. You can't do this. Actually, I can. I own the house. James threw the contract on the floor, his face full of irritation. This is unfair. We're your family. No, James, you're my stepmother and my half-siblings who treated me like a maid for years. If you want to stay here, you'll pay like anyone else. The argument dragged on for hours, but I didn't back down. In the end, I made it clear there was no room for negotiation. Sandra finally realized she had no way out, but before leaving the room, she took one last shot. You'll never have your father's support after this. I smiled, tired but firm. We'll see. In the following days, she tried everything. Manipulating my father, creating tension in the house, even trying to turn James and Melissa against me. But nothing worked. They all signed a contract and the first payment came the next month. The truth is, after years of being overlooked, I was finally in control. And for the first time, I didn't care what they thought. I had the house, the power, and most importantly, my peace of mind. They could deal with the reality now. The months went by, and the pressure inside that house only grew stronger. At first, Sandra, James, and Melissa tried to act as if nothing was happening. They reluctantly paid the first month of rent as if they believed I would soon change my mind. But I didn't. The payments started getting delayed, first by a few days, then weeks. The excuse was always the same. Unexpected expenses piled up, bills, temporary difficulties. But I knew it wasn't just that. James no longer bought his expensive games and spent more time locked in his room. Melissa stopped showing off new clothes and rarely went out. And Sandra seemed to be falling apart before my eyes. She looked exhausted, her face tired with deep dark circles. So, I decided it was time to settle the situation once and for all. On a rainy night, I gathered everyone in the living room. The atmosphere was heavy. My father sat on the couch, defeated, while Sandra stood with her arms crossed, trying to maintain a superiority that no longer existed. James and Melissa, as usual, kept their heads down, avoiding eye contact. It's been 3 months since you've paid the full rent. I began, my voice calm but firm. I could easily throw all of you out. Sandra widened her eyes, outraged. You would never do that. I looked at her coldly. Don't underestimate how much I've endured. But look, I'll be fair. I won't charge my father rent. Not because he can't pay, but because I know he's being manipulated. Out of respect for him, I'll spare him this responsibility. My father lifted his head, surprised, but stayed silent. He knew I was right. Now, with you, Sandra, it's different, I continued, locking my gaze on her. You've always treated me like a maid here, bossing me around while your children didn't lift a finger. So I thought of something fair. You can continue living here, but instead of paying with money, you'll pay with work. You'll clean the house, do the laundry, cook. You'll be the maid here. Sandra's face turned pale. She raised a hand to her mouth as if trying to contain her despair. You must be joking, she whispered, her voice weak. I'm not. My voice was firm. And to make things crystal clear, you will wear a maid's uniform. I want you in that black and white apron, hairnet on your head, the full outfit. If you're going to work, do it properly. Sandra stood frozen for a few seconds. Then, unable to hold back her tears, she turned to my father. David, are you going to let her humiliate me like this? My father looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Dad, with all due respect, don't interfere. You know why I'm not charging you, but Sandra needs to pay for what she's done. He sighed, lowering his head. Sandra remained there, quietly sobbing. Melissa watched her, pale, and James didn't react at all. Sandra left the room, defeated. The next morning, I went downstairs and found Sandra in the kitchen. She was wearing a maid's uniform. A simple black dress, a white apron tied around her waist, and a hairnet covering her hair. Her expression was empty as she mechanically cleaned the counter. Good morning, Sandra. I spoke naturally. She didn't answer. I grabbed a glass of orange juice and sipped it calmly. Then, as if by accident, I let the glass slip from my hand, spilling the juice all over the floor. Oh, how clumsy of me. Could you clean that up, please? She stood still for a moment, then slowly, she knelt and started cleaning the floor with a cloth. But it didn't stop there. At lunch, I made a point of sitting at the table and asking Sandra to serve me. Sandra, put more sauce on my plate, and please don't spill it. She served me in silence, her hands trembling. I stared directly at her, savoring every second of that role reversal. It wasn't cruelty. It was justice. Later in the afternoon, I called Sandra into the living room. Sandra, the living room windows are dirty. I want you to clean them now. She hesitated. But it's already getting dark. I tilted my head. I asked you to clean them, Sandra. Or would you prefer to pay rent with money? She turned red, bit her lips, and grabbed the cleaning supplies. As she climbed onto the stool to clean the windows, I looked at James and Melissa, who silently watched the scene. You two could help, you know. Or would you prefer to sign new contracts with higher rent? They quickly got up and disappeared into their rooms. Sandra kept cleaning in silence, and I sat there, watching. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I felt a peace I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't joy, it wasn't malice. It was the certainty that I had finally put things in order. And I don't regret it. Sandra got exactly what she deserved. My father made his choice, and I made mine. If anyone thinks I was cruel, let them think what they want. No one lived what I lived. Now I finally have peace, and I won't give that up for anyone. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I paid for my sister's education while working 2 jobs, only for her to call me a loser during a family dinner. She was surprised when I stopped paying her rent and told everyone why she could no longer afford her lifestyle. When my younger sister, Louisa, got into her dream university, the whole family acted like it was the greatest achievement of all time. My parents were beaming with pride. Louisa was already talking about the career she was going to pursue, while I sat in a corner silently calculating how we were going to pay for it. My parents didn't have the money to cover her education. They made that clear when they started hinting at it during family conversations. Louisa is so smart, but university is so expensive these days. My mother would say, looking at me as if I didn't already know where that conversation was headed. I didn't have much. I worked as a mechanic and was trying to save up to buy a house. But Louisa was my sister, and I thought, what harm could there be in helping? So I started contributing. At first, it was small things, her books, a bit of food. But it didn't stop there. Soon, I was paying her rent, her bills, even her nights out when she needed to relax. Every time she asked for money, it came with a promise, like, I'll pay you back when I graduate, or, Mom and Dad just can't help right now. The worst part was that my parents acted like it was my duty to help. Family takes care of family, they would say, as if I wasn't already killing myself working 2 jobs to keep them afloat. Louisa, meanwhile, acted as if the world revolved around her. She posted pictures of fancy parties and weekend getaways, smiling as if she wasn't living off my hard work. I kept telling myself it was temporary. Once she graduates, it'll all be worth it, I thought. But deep down, I started resenting the fact that my life was on hold while hers sped ahead. All thanks to me. I thought things would get better once Louisa settled into her university routine. I imagined she would realize how much I was doing for her and show some gratitude. But if anything changed, it was her sense of entitlement, which only grew. The first real sign was her spending habits. While I was skipping meals and working late shifts to pay her rent, Louisa was showing off her new wardrobe on social media. Designer bags, trendy shoes, fancy dinners, things I could never afford. At first, I tried to justify it. Maybe she got a part-time job. Or, she's just exaggerating to look good. But when I asked her about it, she shrugged. Everyone at university dresses like this, she said. I don't want to look out of place. It wasn't just her attitude toward money. It was everything. She treated me like a walking ATM. She never asked how I was doing or if I needed help. My parents weren't any better. Whenever I tried to talk about how much I was struggling, they guilt-tripped me into silence. "She's your sister," my mother would say. "She's building a future. You should be proud to help her." But it wasn't just helping, it was sacrificing. My weekends disappeared, my savings were wiped out, and that house I always dreamed of? Forget it. Meanwhile, Louisa couldn't even be bothered to send a thank you note. Instead, she would call to complain about her professors. It was always something like, "They don't understand how hard I work," or "It's not fair that they give me so much work." And I, exhausted after a double shift at the workshop, had to listen without arguing. After all, if I dared to say anything, I'd be the insensitive one who didn't understand how hard she was fighting for her future. Then came the dinner, an invitation from my mom, as always disguised as an attempt at family bonding, but I knew it was just another chance for everyone to pretend everything was fine. Even so, I accepted, thinking it might be nice to have a moment of peace away from work and bills. I arrived at my parents' house straight from the workshop, my hands still marked with grease, and was greeted with the same coldness as always. My mom was busy in the kitchen and my dad was on the couch watching TV. Apparently, Louisa was already there in her room, resting from her exhausting week. Of course, because studying a few hours and partying on the weekend must be exhausting. When we finally sat down at the table, I tried to focus on the food and tune out the conversation, but Louisa didn't take long to start her show, as she always did. "You won't believe what happened at university," she began with that exaggerated tone only she could use. I had to redo an entire assignment because the professor said it wasn't up to standard. As if he knew anything. No one responded immediately. My dad let out a supportive grunt. My mom nodded her head, and I kept chewing, trying not to say what I really thought. But she didn't stop there. "It's so frustrating. I'm one of the best students, but it seems like they just want to bring me down. It's like they don't want to see me succeed. You know what I mean, right?" I took a deep breath, mentally counting to 10. But before I could stop myself, my mom decided to add fuel to the fire. "Louisa, sweetheart, don't worry. You're brilliant and we all know it. Some professors are just jealous of your potential." I couldn't hold back. Or maybe they're trying to teach you something and you just don't want to listen. The silence at the table was immediate. Louisa shot me a glare that could kill, but I kept eating, pretending not to notice. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, her voice full of indignation. "It means maybe it's time to stop blaming everyone else and start taking some responsibility. You're in university, Louisa. You're not a child anymore. You can't expect the world to treat you like a princess." My mom tried to intervene, but Louisa was already ready to attack. "Oh, of course, coming from who? The mechanic who never left his workshop? Please, you don't even know what responsibility is. All you do is fix cars and complain about life. You know what you are? A loser. That's what you are." The word hit like a slap. For a moment, everything stopped. I looked at her, incredulous, trying to process how the same person I had supported for years, who lived off my hard work, could stand there insulting me in front of the entire family. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin on the table. My mom started to say something, but I raised my hand to silence her. "That's enough. I'm done." I looked Louisa straight in the eyes. "You want to call me a loser? Fine. But you know what? This loser paid your rent, your bills, and even your damn parties while you pretended to be an adult. This loser gave up his own dreams so you could live yours, and what do I get in return? Insults." She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't let her. "From today, it's over. I'm not paying for anything else. I won't sustain your spoiled princess lifestyle anymore. Want to call me a loser? Fine, but now you'll have to figure out how to pay your bills on your own. Good luck with that." My mom started crying and my dad, in his typical apathy, muttered something like, "We'll talk about this later." But I wasn't willing to listen anymore. I grabbed my things and left, leaving the table in silence. On the way home, I felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief for finally saying what needed to be said, but anger for letting the situation get this far. I knew Louisa wouldn't take it easily. She was good at manipulating people, and my parents would probably do everything they could to make me back down. But this time, it wouldn't work. When I got home, my phone started ringing. It was my mom. I ignored it, Then messages started coming in. First from her, then from Louisa. "You can't do this to me, I need you. How am I supposed to pay the rent now?" I read them all, but I didn't respond. I knew this war was far from over, but for the first time in years, I felt like I had a chance to take back my life. When I finally got home that night, I was still trembling with anger. The word loser echoed in my mind like a knife spinning endlessly. The audacity of Louisa to call me that after everything I had done for her was unbearable. I knew she was used to being treated as the center of the universe, but this had crossed every line. However, as I sat on the living room couch, I began to feel something different. For the first time in years, I felt free from carrying the weight of her choices, free from having to sacrifice my own dreams for someone who didn't even understand the meaning of gratitude. That thought brought me unexpected relief, and I decided that from now on, I would be the priority in my own life. The next day, I woke up early and went straight to the workshop. It was a Saturday, but it made no difference to me as I worked every day to support a life that wasn't mine. While tightening bolts and replacing parts, I felt something different in the air. A new determination. Maybe it was time to change. Maybe it was finally time to think about my own future. But as expected, Louisa wasn't going to let it go easily. Before noon, my phone was already full of messages from her and my parents. Her messages ranged from desperate pleas to veiled threats. "If you don't pay my rent, I'll be evicted. Don't you care about my future?" And of course, the classic manipulation. "Mom and Dad are so disappointed in you. They never thought you could be so selfish." I took a deep breath and decided it was time to face this once and for all. I called her. When she answered, her voice was loaded with anger and contempt. "Finally, I thought you were going to keep ignoring me. How can you be so stingy? I can't believe you're actually leaving me in this situation. Louisa, I just want to know one thing." I began, trying to keep my composure. "Do you really think I'm a loser?" She was silent for a moment, but she didn't take long to retort. "Well, I was just being honest. I mean, look at you. You're stuck in that mediocre job while I'm trying to build a real career." I snorted, a short and bitter sound. "So, you really think your life is better than mine? That I'm inferior to you because I'm a mechanic?" "It's not that," she said, but her voice betrayed the lie. "I just think you could have done more with your life." "Done more?" I finally exploded. "Louisa, do you know what I've done with my life? I've dedicated it entirely to supporting you. I paid for your university, your rent, your bills, your parties. While you were spending my money on clothes and trips, I was skipping meals and working double shifts. And yet you think you have the right to look down on me? You have no idea what responsibility is." She tried to interrupt, but I didn't let her. "Do you know what's more? You're there thinking you're superior, but who's going to be evicted now that I've stopped paying for everything? Who's going to have to learn to live in the real world without depending on me? And do you know what else? I'm done. Done being used. Done being the idiot who does everything while you live like a spoiled princess." There was a long silence on the other end of the line until she finally responded, her voice trembling. I just thought you wanted to help the family. I didn't know you felt so much hatred toward me." "Hatred?" I shot back. "I don't feel hatred, Louisa. I feel disappointment. I feel sadness realizing you never saw what I did for you. And now, I feel relief because I've finally chosen myself." Before she could respond, I hung up. My heart was racing, but for the first time I felt no regret. I knew she would have to face the consequences of her own arrogance. And as expected, she didn't fare well. 2 weeks later, I received a message from my mom saying Louisa had been evicted. Apparently, her amazing internship didn't pay enough to even cover half the rent. She tried asking her friends for help, but as is often the case with people like her, she had no one truly willing to sacrifice for her. Ironic, isn't it? Now she finally understood what I had done for her. My parents, of course, tried to intervene. My mom called almost every day, saying I was being cruel, that Louisa was my sister and I had an obligation to help her. But this time I didn't give in. I didn't answer, didn't back down, and let them deal with the consequences of their own choices. After all, who had decided I was responsible for her? Not me. Meanwhile, I started investing in myself. I opened a savings account, something I hadn't done in years. I started researching courses to specialize in advanced automotive mechanics and even considered opening my own business. For the first time, I had hope for my own future. And Louisa? Well, I heard she had to move back in with our parents, something she had sworn she would never do. I imagine it was a hard blow to her ego, but honestly, it was no longer my problem. Finally, I was free, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to live my own life my way. Now on to the next story. Story 4. I was still shaking snow off my coat when my Aunt Lydia leaned in with that tight smile she always wore when she thought she was doing me a favor. "Maybe don't bring up your job situation," she whispered, her breath smelling like peppermint schnapps and condescension. "It'll depress the kids." I hadn't even taken off my shoes yet. I blinked, caught between a laugh and a sigh. "Sure," I said. "Wouldn't want to ruin the festive mood." Then I smiled like I hadn't heard that exact line in 5 different variations at every family gathering for the last 2 years. I dropped my coat on the designated guest bed, kicked off my boots, and followed the sound of forced laughter into the living room. "My name's Aaron. I'm 34, and for the last decade, I've been the co-founder of a tech company that most of my family still thinks is some little computer thing. They don't get what I do, and they've never really asked. At best, I'm good with computers. At worst, I'm unemployed but make websites for money. I stopped correcting them years ago. It's easier that way. After all, how do you explain seed funding rounds and venture capital to people who still think the Wi-Fi goes out when it rains? Thanksgiving with my extended family has always been a delicate exercise in restraint. I keep my answers short, smile through the backhanded compliments, and let the conversations drift towards safer waters. The truth is, I've always been the odd one out. I didn't go to med school like my cousin Ellie or become a civil engineer like my older brother, Mark. I didn't marry young or buy a house in the suburbs. I didn't give my parents grandkids to brag about at church. I built something from scratch quietly, and apparently that made me the least impressive person in every room. This year was supposed to be different though, or so I thought. I'd driven 6 hours through sleet to get to Aunt Lydia's house because my mom guilt tripped me into it. "Everyone's coming this year," she said over the phone. "Even Cody's bringing his fiancée. You'll love her." She always said that as if loving someone was my responsibility. Like if I didn't fall in line and nod politely, I was the problem. Cody is my younger cousin by 4 years. He was the golden boy even as a kid, the kind of guy who peaked in high school and just kept skating on charm and good hair. His parents bragged about him like he was the second coming of Steve Jobs. Never mind that he'd bounced between 4 different majors in college and burned through a trust fund in his 20s. He was a go-getter while I was just quiet. I stepped into the living room and immediately regretted it. The whole space was decked out in the kind of autumn Pinterest overload only Lydia could pull off. Tiny pumpkins, plaid blankets, grateful heart signs, and cursive. The kids were screaming over a Mario Kart match on the big screen. The adults were gathered near the kitchen island, wine glasses in hand, laughing a little too loudly. I spotted Cody across the room, one arm slung around a tall brunette with impossibly straight teeth. She looked like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle blog. "Hey, there he is," Cody said, grinning wide and waving me over like I was the waiter bringing appetizers. "Uncle Tech Guy, you make it out of your mom's basement or what?" The words hit me like a slap, not because they were original. He's been recycling that joke since 2015, but because of the casual cruelty tucked into the delivery. He said it in front of everyone, loud enough to get a few chuckles. I forced a grin. "Good to see you too, Cody." "Seriously though," he said, handing his fiancée a drink and turning fully toward me. "What have you been up to? Still doing like websites and stuff?" There it was, the opener. I could play it safe, toss out something vague and unthreatening, or I could answer truthfully and risk a full derailment of dinner. I went with the usual. "Yeah, still working with a couple startups. It's been good." He smirked and raised his eyebrows. "Startups, huh? That code for unemployed." "Cody?" Aunt Lydia warned gently, but she was smiling too. She always did this. Acted like the referee while secretly egging him on. "Don't worry, I'm just messing with him. Cody said, raising both hands in mock innocence. I mean, I'm sure Aaron's got some top-secret project. Probably building the next Google in his garage. The room laughed again. I laughed, too, but it felt hollow in my throat. I made my way to the drink table and poured myself a generous glass of red. My mom caught my eye and gave me the kind of smile that was meant to be reassuring but only made things worse. Like she was proud of me for not causing a scene. Like enduring humiliation was some kind of quiet strength. Dinner was called an hour later. We all crammed around the long table Lydia had set up with name cards and gold chargers. I was wedged between Ellie and Aunt Pam, both of whom were already a few glasses deep into their wine. Across from me sat Cody and his fiancée, whose name I still hadn't caught. So, she said brightly, looking right at me. Cody told me you work in tech too. Before I could respond, Cody cut in. Yeah, kind of. He's more like a freelancer, like gigs and stuff. Got it? She said, nodding politely, but with that look, half sympathy, half dismissal. I didn't blame her. She didn't know better. Actually, I said, setting down my fork, I run a company. Cody laughed. Oh yeah? He's the CEO of what exactly, Aaron? Tell them the name. It's something like Pixel Crunch or Bite Dust or whatever, right? Bite Nest, I said flatly. We build enterprise security solutions. We just closed Series B funding last quarter. There was a brief silence. Not long, just long enough. Cody blinked. Wait, seriously? I nodded. Seriously. He looked at me, then looked at his fiancée. Then he smiled again, but it was thinner this time. Well, guess we're both in tech, huh? She looked impressed, which seemed to annoy him. He just got an interview at Everlock, she said proudly. Super competitive. Big deal. Nice, I said. I've met with their board a few times. Good team. That's when he smirked and said it. Doubt you'd even get past security. It was a joke. At least it sounded like one. But the edge in his voice was unmistakable. A challenge. An attempt to put me back in my place. My stomach tightened. I looked around the table. Some were laughing, some just quietly watching. I stood up slowly and grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. Everyone fell silent. I'm the CEO, I said. See you Monday. And just like that, the entire room froze. I didn't wait for their reactions. I walked out, but that was only the beginning. By the time I got to my car, the adrenaline had turned sour in my stomach. I wasn't even sure where I was going. I just drove out of the cul-de-sac, past the row of identical houses with their glowing porch lights and blow-up turkeys, through the slick streets until the quiet hum of the tires steadied my breathing. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just kept hearing his voice echo in my head. Doubt you'd even get past security. It wasn't the insult itself that got to me. I'd had worse. It was the way it landed with the others. How no one spoke up. Not my mom, not my aunt, not even my brother, who I caught smirking into his napkin like it was all just harmless fun. It was the ease with which they all let it slide. As if that kind of jab was normal, expected, even welcome, like I deserved it. I parked in a grocery store lot and just sat there gripping the wheel, watching my breath fog the windshield. Part of me wanted to drive back home, call it a night, leave them to their wine and pie and whispered gossip. But another part of me, the part that had stayed quiet for years, started to simmer. I don't know if it was the look in Cody's eyes, or the way his fiancée's smile flickered when I said the words, I'm the CEO, but something shifted in me. I realized then that no matter how successful I became, no matter how far I'd climbed, my family would always see me as that quiet kid with the hand-me-down laptop and big ideas no one took seriously. I didn't go back that night. I booked a hotel on my phone, grabbed some takeout, and spent the rest of the evening watching reruns of The Office with the sound turned low. But I didn't sleep much. My mind kept replaying the dinner, dissecting every glance and every chuckle. I kept thinking, why do I keep showing up for people who don't respect me? The next morning, I checked my phone. 8 texts from my mom, 3 missed calls. All versions of the same message. Please come back. Let's talk. It got out of hand. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to the one place I always found clarity. A little coffee shop downtown, the kind with too many plants and lo-fi music playing on loop. I ordered a black coffee and sat near the window, watching the snowfall in soft waves. That's when my brother Mark called. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. "You good?" he asked, skipping any kind of greeting. "I'm fine." There was a pause. Cody was being a jerk. "You know how he gets." "I do," I said. "And you laughed." He exhaled sharply. "It wasn't about you, man. Don't be so sensitive." My hand tightened around the coffee cup. "Right? It's always a joke when it's about me." "Look," he said. "You made your point. The whole CEO mic drop, iconic, but maybe don't overreact. Yeah, you've always been kind of private. People just don't get what you do. They don't even try to," I said. "They assume the worst and call it a joke." Okay, he said quickly, as if afraid I'd hang up. "Look, just come back for dessert. Everyone's asking about you." "Are they?" I said. "Or are they just wondering if I'm going to ruin more of their perfect night?" He didn't answer that. Just said, "Think about it," and hung up. I didn't go back that day either. But the thing about family is you can't avoid them forever, especially not during a week-long holiday visit where half of them are staying in the same town. Eventually, the gravitational pull drags you back into orbit. And sure enough, 2 days later, I got an invitation. "Game night at Lydia's. Please come. Let's put the awkwardness behind us." It was from my mom, followed by a guilt-tripping their family errand. So I went. Against my better judgment, I went. The moment I walked in, I knew nothing had changed. "Oh, look, it's Mr. Silicon Valley," Uncle Jerry said, holding up a solo cup in mock salute. Cody gave me a nod from across the room, his arm draped around his fiancée like he was posing for a catalog. "You made it," he said, as if I were the one who owed him something. "Just here for the games," I said flatly. They were playing charades. Something about the fake laughter and the forced closeness made my skin crawl. I kept to myself, only speaking when absolutely necessary. But I noticed things. How Cody kept slipping in little comments, just low enough that only those nearby could hear. How his fiancée looked at me differently now, curious, maybe even a little intimidated. And how Lydia, ever the queen bee, watched me like I was a wild card she didn't quite know how to handle. Then came the breaking point. It started small, a joke during the game. Someone acted out the social network and Cody shouted, "That's Aaron's origin story, except with fewer friends and way less money." People laughed. I didn't. I stood there stone-faced and said nothing. But later, as we gathered around for dessert, Lydia brought out a cake. "We're celebrating Cody's big interview," she announced. "He's up for a job at Everlock." Fingers crossed. There was applause. Cheers. Cody beamed like a groom at his wedding. And then Lydia turned to me. "Aaron, maybe you can give him some pointers," she said, too sweetly. "You've applied to places like that, right?" I blinked. "I've hired from places like that," I said. The room quieted again. "Well," she said, laughing nervously, "maybe you could help Cody with a mock interview, since you've got the time." And that was it. That was the moment. The moment I realized they didn't just misunderstand what I did. They chose not to understand. They needed me to stay small so Cody could keep shining. I set my plate down and stood up. I said, "I don't think I'm the one who needs help preparing." Cody snorted. "Oh, you offered me a job now?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I already did," I said. "Last year, you ghosted the interview." Dead silence. His smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" I turned to Lydia. "Remember when I asked if anyone in the family was job hunting? I was expanding my team and wanted to help. I sent you the listing." She nodded slowly, her eyes flicking to Cody. "I sent it to you too," I said. "Through Mom." "You never replied." Cody's face had gone pale. "I didn't." He started, but I held up a hand. "It's fine," I said. "I figured you weren't interested in startups. But just so you know, ByteNest has 3 full-time engineers who came from Everlock, including their former director of infrastructure." More silence. I took a breath, feeling my heart hammering in my chest. I'm done pretending I don't exist, I said. You don't have to understand what I do, but you will respect it or you'll never see me at one of these gatherings again. Then I walked out again, but this time something followed me. Not someone, something. A shift, a ripple, a reaction I wasn't expecting, at least not from her. Because the next morning I woke up to a message. Not from my mom, not from Mark, from Cody's fiancé. Hey Aaron, can we talk? And that was when things got really messy. I didn't reply right away. Her message sat there in my inbox like a forgotten candle, still burning. Can we talk? For words, plain and harmless on the surface, but heavy, like they knew more than they were letting on. I read it half a dozen times before tossing my phone onto the hotel nightstand and pulling the comforter over my head. The walls were thin. I could hear someone wheeling a suitcase down the hallway. Somewhere, a baby was crying. My eyes were wide open. The moment after you stand up for yourself. You expect it to feel like freedom, some mix of triumph and peace. But in my case, it was mostly silence. Not external silence, but the kind that hums inside you like the aftermath of a fire alarm. It rang in my ears while I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I'd gone too far. My phone buzzed again later that morning. This time it was my mom. Cody is devastated. Lydia says you embarrassed him in front of everyone. She's talking about not inviting you to Christmas unless you apologize. I didn't respond. A second message came 5 minutes later. I know you didn't mean to cause trouble, but maybe just call and clear the air. We're family, Aaron. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing my teeth slowly, watching the steam rise around my reflection. I looked tired. Not just the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the deep kind, the kind that builds up after years of swallowing your pride until your stomach is full of unspoken words. My toothbrush paused mid-stroke, and I said out loud, "Why is it always me?" No one had called to ask if I was okay. No one asked what I was feeling. Instead, I was the one expected to fix it again, to patch the cracks I didn't cause, to take the high road because no one else would even look for one. I spent the rest of that day walking around the city, head pulled up against the cold. I bought a coffee I didn't drink and wandered through a bookstore, flipping pages but not reading a word. It wasn't until I found myself sitting on a park bench at dusk, watching frost creep over the grass, that I finally opened her message again. Hey Aaron, can we talk? I typed a simple reply about what. She responded in less than a minute. About Cody, about what you said, and about Everlock. That got my attention. I don't want to make things worse, she added. But I also don't want to be part of something fake. We arranged to meet at the same cafe I'd visited after Thanksgiving. She showed up wearing a beige wool coat and a look of quiet resolve. No makeup, no flashy smiles. Just someone who looked like she was waking up from a long nap and seeing the room clearly for the first time. Hi, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Thanks for coming. Of course, I said, though part of me was still guarded. I didn't know what this was yet. Curiosity, guilt, drama? She wrapped her hands around her mug and looked down. I think I owe you an apology I hadn't expected. I didn't really get it at first, she continued. When Cody joked about you, I thought it was just sibling rivalry. Like, he made it sound like you were this guy who never left his mom's house and worked on weird hobby apps. But then I Googled you. I blinked. You Googled me? She nodded. Byte Nest has an article on TechCrunch and a Forbes piece and a patent. I just sipped my coffee. She leaned in slightly. Why don't they know? Because they never asked, I said. And when they assumed the worst, it was easier not to fight it. You try to explain something once or twice, and when all you get is rolled eyes or smirks, you stop trying. She nodded slowly. He's insecure. He says stuff to make people laugh, but he gets weird when someone outshines him. I see it now, but at first, I don't know. I just thought that was normal. I looked at her carefully. So, why are you here? She hesitated. Because I'm not sure I want to marry someone who tears people down just to feel tall. And also, she paused again. I think he lied about the Everlock interview. My eyes narrowed. What do you mean? He told me he had an inside connection. Said the recruiter reached out to him, but after what you said, I looked into it. There's no record of a recruiter ever emailing him. He's been avoiding my questions all week. And when I asked him about your company, about ghosting that interview, he flipped out. I leaned back. So he'd been trying to impress her and keep up with me. She said he saw your success as a threat. And that scares me because if he can't even celebrate someone in his own family doing well, what happens when I succeed at something? I stayed quiet. She wasn't really asking me. Eventually, she gave a tired smile. Anyway, thank you for standing up for yourself and for not sinking to his level. She left after that with a promise to figure some things out. I didn't press her. It wasn't my relationship to fix. That night, I returned to my hotel and opened my laptop for the first time all week. Notifications flooded in. Investors checking in. An engineer asking for approval. Product manager requesting feedback. It felt good, oddly grounding, like a reminder that the version of me my family refused to see did exist and was, in fact, thriving. I buried myself in work for the next few days, not out of spite or distraction, but because it reminded me who I really was when no one was watching. I scheduled a board meeting, closed a hiring round, and finalized a partnership with a European cybersecurity firm, all from that hotel room. And the more I leaned into my real life, the less weight my family's perception carried. But the storm wasn't over yet. A few days before I was set to head home, my mom invited me to brunch. Just you and me, she promised. No drama. I agreed, hoping maybe we could finally talk like adults. We met at a quiet diner just outside of town. She hugged me a little too tightly when I walked in. And for a second, I thought maybe this would be okay, until she started talking. You really hurt Cody, she said, stirring her tea. I froze. He hurt me. I know, she said quickly. But you humiliated him in front of everyone. He's your cousin. And I'm your son, I said. She sighed. You've always been sensitive, Aaron. I laughed, bitter and low. Sensitive or tired of being mocked? You could have handled it differently, she said. Why did you have to make a scene? Because they wouldn't hear me otherwise? I said, sharper than I meant to. Because I've spent 10 years building something no one in this family even tries to understand. And the moment I set a boundary, I'm the problem. She looked away. And you know what? I continued. I'm done apologizing for existing. There was a long silence. Finally, she said, You've changed. I've grown, I corrected. We didn't speak much after that. I paid for her tea, hugged her briefly, and walked out feeling lighter. I returned home 2 days later. My apartment greeted me like an old friend. Sunlight through tall windows, the soft hum of my espresso machine, the scent of cedar from the candle I forgot I left lit. I stood in the center of my living room and just breathed. Home. That week, I threw myself into the business. We launched a new beta. I was invited to speak at a virtual conference. Byte Nest was quietly gaining momentum in circles that mattered. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had something to prove. Then one morning, an envelope showed up at my door. No return address, just my name, handwritten in shaky cursive. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single folded page. Aaron, I owe you an apology. I've spent years letting other people define you through jokes, through assumptions, through silence, and I'm ashamed of that. You deserve better. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Aunt Lydia. I read it twice. Then I set it aside and stared out the window. Maybe they were starting to wake up, but I wasn't done yet. Because something had shifted inside me over those few days. Something irreversible. I no longer needed their approval, but I didn't need to decide what came next. And that's when I had an idea. Something Cody would never see coming. Something that would rewrite the entire script they'd written for me. I picked up my phone, opened my notes, and began to draft a plan. It was subtle at first, just a few scribbled thoughts in my phone's notes app while I sipped espresso and watched the sun creep across my apartment floor. But within days, it evolved into something sharper, more deliberate. The gears in my mind, long rusted by silence and forced humility, were turning again. For once, I wasn't just reacting to my family. I was planning. I didn't want vengeance just for the sake of it. This wasn't about rage or pettiness. It was about balance, about finally reshaping the dynamic they had carefully built over decades, brick by brick, where Cody could coast through life on charm and empty promises while I was quietly discounted in every room. This time, I wasn't going to let my success speak for itself. I was going to make them listen. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A week into the new year, I got a text from my mom. "Hey honey, Lydia wants to host a family futures brunch next Sunday. Everyone's coming. Could be a chance to reconnect." Family futures brunch. I nearly laughed. It sounded like one of Lydia's cringy little branding efforts, like she was throwing a TED Talk in her kitchen. I could already picture the mimosas, the pastel index cards for goal setting, the performative speeches about investing in ourselves this year. It was peak Lydia. But buried under that glittery layer of nonsense was the real motive. This was a chance for Cody to shine again. He probably pitched the idea himself. He'd be standing there in his tailored shirt announcing his goals with that fake humility, dropping Everlock's name every 5 minutes. He needed to reestablish himself as the golden boy. And I was going to let him because this time I wouldn't be caught off guard. I texted back, "Sure, I'll be there." And then I got to work. First, I called my COO, Marlene. She was sharp, no nonsense, and loyal to the bone. I filled her in not on the family drama, but on the publicity angle. "We're going to soft launch the secure bridge deal at the end of this month, right?" I asked. "Yep. Press release is drafted. NDAs are nearly done. We're just waiting on Secure Bridge to finish their final audit." "What if we pre-teased it just enough to stir buzz?" She hesitated. "You mean leak it?" "Not quite. Just make sure the partnership is discoverable. Quietly. Maybe update our LinkedIn headers and I'll post something subtle. Let people connect the dots." She paused, then chuckled. "You're up to something. Let's just say I've got an audience I need to re-educate." Within 24 hours, ByteNest's landing page was tweaked with a vague reference to an upcoming enterprise-level infrastructure project with a Fortune 500 client. My LinkedIn photo was updated to one of me at a conference, and I posted a humble little blurb. "Exciting things in motion this quarter. Grateful for the team behind the scenes making magic happen. #cybergrowth, #2025 goals." The post exploded. Comments from peers, DMs from investors, even a few former classmates who used to pretend I didn't exist. All of it added fuel to the image I was quietly constructing. Not just of success, but of relevance, of momentum. And Cody? Cody wasn't even on LinkedIn. Next, I made a private list. Names of people who'd been dismissive, condescending, or outright cruel over the years. Not out of spite, but for clarity. Lydia, obviously. My brother Mark, who never missed a chance to downplay my work. Uncle Jerry, who once asked if I ever planned to get a real job. And of course Cody. But I wasn't going to confront them. Not directly. That would be too easy. No, what I wanted was something quieter. A tilt of the room, a shift in the energy. I wanted them to question everything they thought they knew about me. I'd already planted the seeds. Now I needed the right soil. 3 days before the brunch, I got another text. This time from an unknown number. "Hi Aaron. This is Natalie, Cody's ex-fiancée." I stared at the screen. Hope this isn't too weird. "I just wanted to say I left him after our talk and I'm really grateful you told the truth. Helped me see things clearer." I didn't respond right away. I reread it a few times, letting it sink in. Then I texted back. "I'm sorry you went through that, but I'm glad you got out." She replied almost instantly, "Thank you. If you ever want to grab coffee sometime, no pressure." I told her maybe after the new year settled. And I meant it. But for now, I had a plan to finish. The morning of the brunch, I wore a navy wool coat, slacks, and a tailored black turtleneck. Clean, professional, understated. The kind of outfit that said, "I didn't come here to play, but I don't need to announce it." I parked across the street from Lydia's house and took a moment in the car. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't even angry. I was ready. Inside, the house was the same as always. Over-decorated, over-perfumed, and full of fake laughter. Lydia greeted me with that strange warmth she reserved for guests she secretly resented. "There he is," she said. Glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it, I replied. Cody was already holding court in the living room, surrounded by relatives, smiling that politician's smile. When he saw me, it flickered for just a second, just long enough to let me know he was still rattled. Aaron, he said, forcing brightness into his voice. Long time, cousin. Good to see you, Cody, I said, shaking his hand firmly. Heard things got complicated. He laughed awkwardly. You know how it is. Not everything's meant to last. I nodded. True. Some things just out themselves, don't they? He didn't reply. The brunch was exactly as nauseating as I expected. Lydia handed out 2025 vision cards, and people went around the table sharing goals. My brother wanted to expand his consulting firm. Ellie was working on her doctorate. Cody, of course, announced he'd be re-strategizing his career and building something big in the tech space. I've got a few investors lined up, he said confidently. We'll see where it goes. Maybe I'll steal a few engineers from Byte Nest. The room laughed. My knuckles tightened around my coffee mug. When it was my turn, I smiled softly and stood. My goals this year are simple, I said. Continue scaling Byte Nest, launch our new infrastructure project with SecureBridge, expand our engineering team, possibly open a satellite office in Berlin. A few heads turned. I caught my mother's eyes widen. Wait, Mark said. SecureBridge? SecureBridge. I nodded. We've been working with them since Q3. Partnership goes public end of the month. Cody's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. Uncle Jerry cleared his throat. Isn't SecureBridge that? What do they do again? Cloud infrastructure, I said. They support half the Fortune 100. Aunt Pam looked impressed. Wow, that's major. I shrugged like it was nothing. We're fortunate. Good timing, good team. The air in the room shifted. Suddenly, Cody's ambition seemed like cosplay. I sat back down. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look at him, but I could feel the balance tilting, the story changing in real time. Lydia, ever the spin master, tried to regain control. Well, we're all proud of the whole family, she said. Everyone's doing amazing things. But it was too late. The seed had sprouted. Over the next half hour, relatives drifted toward me, asking questions, requesting advice. One uncle mentioned his son was looking for internships. Ellie asked if I could speak at her university's entrepreneurship panel. Even Mark offered to grab lunch sometime to pick my brain. Cody said nothing. He kept sipping his mimosa, staring out the window. And I just smiled, because this wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't ruin his life. I didn't humiliate him publicly. I didn't expose his lies. I just did what I'd always done. Worked quietly, built something real, and let the truth walk in on its own 2 feet. But I wasn't done. Not yet, because there was still one more thing I needed to do. Something that would end the story exactly the way it deserved. And all it required was an invitation, which, as fate would have it, was waiting in my inbox that very night. Hey Aaron, Byte Nest sounds amazing. Would love for you to come speak at our alumni entrepreneurship panel next month. Guest list includes a few folks from Everlock, Netgear, and Strat. Let me know. Dana, Stanford Alumni Committee. I clicked reply. Would love to, and I have the perfect story to tell. Now it was just a matter of time. The night before the Stanford panel, I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the lapels on my charcoal blazer, trying not to smirk. I'd been invited as the keynote speaker for their Founders in Tech series, a well-attended event meant to inspire the next wave of ambitious undergrads and fresh-out-of-college builders. But for me, it was something more. I wasn't there to impress students. I was there to rewrite the story. I'd found out through a mutual LinkedIn connection that Everlock would have a few scouts in the room, mainly talent acquisition leads, but also someone from the partnerships team. The company Cody had been bragging about for months. The one he claimed had scouted him was about to watch me speak from the front row. The irony wasn't lost on me. The auditorium was packed. Stanford's tech campus always buzzed with the kind of wide-eyed, caffeine-fueled energy I'd missed since my early 20s. Rows of clean notebooks, MacBooks open, startup hoodies everywhere. I stepped onto the stage, mic clipped to my collar, and looked out at the sea of faces. And then, in the third row, my eyes landed on him. Cody. He sat between two strangers wearing a blazer that didn't quite fit and a smile that flickered when he met my gaze. I almost laughed. Of course, he was here. He wasn't listed on any of the official materials. He must have registered late, maybe hoping to pitch himself to Everlock again or ride the coattails of someone in the audience. Typical Cody, always chasing gravity instead of creating it. I turned to the mic. Hi everyone. My name is Aaron. I'm the founder and CEO of ByteNest, a cybersecurity infrastructure firm based here in the Bay. Polite applause. I wasn't always a CEO. 10 years ago, I was just another kid with a clunky laptop and a bad haircut, tinkering with code between shifts at a grocery store. I didn't have a roadmap. What I did have was a lot of people telling me what I couldn't do. Heads nodded. I let the silence hang for a beat. Some of them were professors. Some were former bosses. Some were family. They didn't say it with malice. They said it with smiles, with raised eyebrows, with just kidding jokes that landed like darts. A few chuckles. They understood. I learned early on that the people closest to you won't always believe in you. Not because they're bad, but because your growth reminds them of their own stagnation. Your risk-taking exposes their fear. So they laugh. Or worse, they pretend you don't exist. The room quieted. But here's the thing. You don't need their permission. I let that sink in. You don't need applause to build something meaningful. You don't need a family full of founders or a list of angel investors at Thanksgiving. Sometimes all you need is to keep showing up. Keep building quietly, patiently until one day you're not in the background anymore. You're the room. Scattered claps turned into a full wave. I smiled, scanning the crowd again. Cody wasn't clapping. I wrapped the talk with a few anecdotes about ByteNest. How we launched with 3 people and a $15,000 seed grant. How we now employed over 80 full-time engineers across 3 countries. How we were preparing to roll out our largest partnership to date with SecureBridge, and how we had offers on the table for a Series C funding round that could push our valuation north of 9 figures. Afterward, there was a Q&A. A few students asked smart questions about scaling and hiring. Someone asked about startup failure rates. I answered them all. Then, I have a question, came a voice from the third row. Cody stood up. I'm Cody, he said, eyes darting nervously around the room. I'm currently pivoting into tech entrepreneurship. What advice do you have for someone who's starting over after some missteps? He smiled like we were teammates sharing an inside joke. I stepped closer to the edge of the stage. Great question, I said. Honestly, own the missteps. Don't pretend they were part of the plan, and definitely don't try to step over others to hide them. A few murmurs. Cody's smile faltered. People can forgive failure, I continued, but they don't forget how you made them feel. If you dismiss someone when they were rising, don't expect them to pull you up when they've arrived. He sat down. After the panel, a line of attendees formed to shake hands, hand out resumes, or just ask follow-up questions. Everlock's team came over, too. The recruiter introduced herself, congratulated me, and then asked, by the way, did you say your name was Aaron Kessler? I nodded. She blinked. You're the Aaron Kessler ByteNest founder? I smiled politely. In the flesh. We actually had an applicant list you as a reference last quarter, she said, flipping through her notes. But you never responded. My stomach turned, but I kept my expression flat. Oh, who was that? She showed me the name, Cody Randall. I laughed, just once. Soft. I wouldn't recommend him, I said. She nodded, scribbled something, and moved on. By the time I left the auditorium, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long orange shadows across the pavement. My phone buzzed. Cody, why did you say that to them? You know I need this. I didn't reply. Instead, I texted my mom. Hope you're well. Just finished speaking at Stanford. Panel went great. Heading home now. She texted back 3 dots. Then, a full minute later, I heard Cody called, crying. What happened? I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed, He tried to use me again. I told the truth. That's all. She didn't reply. I turned off my phone and walked to my car, exhaling slowly. 2 weeks later, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. Ellie was getting married in July. On the back, in handwritten script, was a note. Hope you'll be there. You're finally being seen, cousin. Attached was a sticky note. Cody's not invited. Long story. Let's talk soon. Ellie. I pinned it to my fridge. And just like that, the story shifted. Not with fireworks, not with screaming matches or dramatic walkouts, but with clarity, with steady, quiet truth. I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped crossing the ones that always led me back to pain. And as for Cody, he lost his mask long before I ever touched it. All I did was hand him a mirror. Now on to the next story. Story 5. I'm Isaac, 31, and apparently the black sheep of the family. It's not a title I chose. It's one they started whispering after I stopped going along with their games. I didn't storm out of any reunion. I didn't get drunk at a birthday party. I just stopped paying for everything. See, for a long time, I was the unofficial family bank. Need a rental car? Isaac can get it. He travels for work, he's got points. Booking a hotel for a cousin's wedding? Isaac can cover it. He'll write it off. The worst part? I actually believed them. I told myself it was just generosity, that this was what family does. Then came the cruise. Started casually, like it always does. Aunt Melanie dropped a message in the group chat. Thinking of a cruise next spring. Family getaway. Suddenly, the chat exploded. Even the quiet cousins chimed in memes, shirt designs, polls about destinations. I saw it all secondhand because I wasn't in the group chat. At first, I thought maybe I was just removed by accident. My phone had glitched before, so I texted my mom, "Hey, what's this about a cruise?" 3 dots. Then, "Oh, we didn't think you'd be interested." I stared at that message for 10 minutes. Not angry, just hollow. The same kind of hollow I'd felt when they told me I wasn't needed at my nephew's baptism because there were already enough uncles. The same hollow I got when I found out the family photos were taken without me during a weekend I'd been told was canceled. I texted back, "I wasn't even asked." She left me on read. I didn't hear anything for weeks after that, until my bank flagged a large transaction. $14,000 cruise payment. It wasn't fraud. I recognized the travel agency, the same one we always used, the same account I'd used to book everything for our big Europe trip 5 years ago. Turns out my dad never removed my card from the family account. I could have canceled it right then. I thought about it, but something in me, maybe the part that still believed they'd apologize, held back. Instead, I waited. The day they left, I didn't even know they were gone. No goodbye, no check-in, just silence until I opened Instagram and saw it. A sea of matching shirts that read, Cruise Crew 2025. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even my godmother. Every generation was there. Every face smiling except mine. And then I got the call. It was my dad. "Wait, you're not on the ship?" I said nothing, just breathed. He chuckled like it was a misunderstanding. "You didn't? You didn't miss the boarding, did you? You were supposed to meet at gate 3 with the others." Still, I didn't respond. My stomach was cold. Then a message buzzed through from my cousin Elise. A photo of the ship's dining hall, table settings, 19 chairs. One of them had a name card, Isaac. A stranger was sitting there, smiling at the camera with a glass of wine in hand. Below it, "Guess the black sheep got the message." That was it. That was the moment something inside me hardened. I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been erased. They had planned to use me, book everything under my account, take the seat with my name on it, and let someone else enjoy the meal I'd unknowingly paid for. And they had the audacity to mock me for not being there. I stood up from my desk, walked to the window, and watched the traffic pass in the morning light. Then I opened the travel app. I knew how it worked. The group reservation was in my name. That meant I had the authority. I could cancel the entire booking as long as they hadn't officially sailed. And they hadn't. The app gave a final warning. "Are you sure you want to cancel this reservation? This action is irreversible. No refunds guaranteed." I tapped yes. 5 seconds later, it was done. I sat in silence. Not angry, not satisfied, just still. An hour passed. Then the calls began. And then a message from Elise again. "What did you do?" I didn't answer. Then came a string of voicemails. One more frantic than the last. "Isaac, please. We're still at port. We can't get on without the booking. They won't let us back on. They're saying the reservation's void. Isaac, this isn't funny. People flew in for this. You're being dramatic. Grow up and fix this. Now we're begging you. Just talk to us." But I didn't. I turned off my phone, let the silence wrap around me like a blanket. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the black sheep. I felt like the wolf. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The air was still heavy with that early summer humidity that makes everything feel slow and deliberate. I didn't reach for my phone. I let it sit on the nightstand, vibrating every few seconds like a wounded animal begging for attention. 84 missed calls, 43 messages. My mother had even left me a voice note, whispering through sobs. I didn't listen. Instead, I made coffee, black, strong, sat down at the kitchen table and just breathed. I don't think I'd realized how much space they took up in my mind. Every decision I made, every vacation, every saved dollar, every free weekend was always weighed against them. Would Mom guilt-trip me if I didn't visit? Would Dad expect me to split the bill again? Would Aunt Melanie forget her wallet and make a joke about how I made more money anyway? It had been a quiet suffocation for years, and now the quiet was mine. Around 7:12 a.m., the front door rattled. Knocking, then more knocking, then fists. "Isaac, open this door right now." It was my father's voice, sharp and furious. Through the peephole, I saw him and Elise. Her hair was still damp, her face red with tears or rage, probably both. My dad was holding a manila folder. His mouth was moving fast, like he was rehearsing an argument he'd been saving since last night. I didn't open the door. Instead, I unlocked it just long enough to slide a yellow sticky note onto the glass. "Not your bank. Not your backup plan. Not your punching bag." He saw it, froze. Elise stepped back like she'd just been hit. He knocked again, quieter this time. "Son, we can fix this. It got out of hand. We didn't mean to leave you out." I didn't respond. I let them stand there for 10 full minutes. Then I heard their footsteps fade, their car starting, tires pulling away, and finally silence again. A few hours later, my cousin Darren, one of the few I actually trusted, texted me privately, "Man, they're melting down. Half the family missed their flights home. Aunt Jan's trying to sue the cruise line. And your mom's been crying since breakfast." I didn't gloat. I didn't feel victorious. But I did feel something like peace. Not because they were miserable, but because I finally stopped apologizing for not letting them treat me like a wallet with a heartbeat. That night, I got a knock on my door again. Not my dad this time. It was my younger sister, Rachel. She looked nervous. She'd always kept her distance when things got tense. Too quiet to pick sides, too scared to make waves. I didn't know Isaac," she said quietly. "I swear, I thought you backed out. That's what they told me." I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. I didn't say anything. She held up a canvas tote. Inside, my crew shirt, still folded, still in its plastic. "They had this made for you. With the rest, they planned for you to be there." I raised an eyebrow. She swallowed. "But when I asked why you weren't in the group chat," Mom said, "he wouldn't care. He always ruins the vibe." There it was. The part they didn't expect anyone to repeat. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I took the tote bag gently and set it down beside the door. "I'm not mad at you, Rachel," I said. "But if you want to stay out of this, stay out of it." She gave a sad nod. "I get it. I do." And she left. I closed the door and locked it. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I booked a solo trip just for me. No group text, no itinerary built around who wanted what excursion. A quiet retreat on the cliffs of Santorini with nothing but a backpack, a camera, and a long overdue sense of freedom. And as I hit confirm, another message buzzed in from my dad. One line, "Please, if you won't talk to us, at least give us a chance to make this right." I didn't respond. Not yet. But part of me was curious what making it right even looked like to people who never thought they were wrong. I didn't block their numbers. Not yet. I wanted the trail, the proof, the desperation. The next day, the group chat I hadn't been invited to, Family Trip 2025, suddenly appeared on my phone. No explanation, no context, just there. 19 people, a digital parade of relatives I hadn't heard from in months, maybe years, suddenly acting like I was part of the club again. The first message, a meme, a cheap, guilt-trippy cartoon of a broken bridge with the words, family. We can repair it if we try. Then came the flood. Aunt Melanie texted, we all made mistakes. Let's move forward, not backward. Love you. Uncle Darren texted, it was a miscommunication. Isaac, no one meant to hurt you. Mom texted, you're my son. That means more than money or travel or anything. Dad texted, what happened shouldn't define our relationship. Call me. Elise texted, okay. Yes, what I texted was mean, but, I was just being sarcastic. Cousin Jared texted, come on, dude. It's just a cruise. Not like we burned your house down. Grandma sent a voice memo, softly crying. You were always my favorite, Isaac. This whole thing is tearing the family apart. I stared at the screen, not typing, not deleting, just watching. The irony, they still didn't get it. It wasn't about the cruise. It wasn't about a seat at the table or matching t-shirts or even the money. It was about being written out again and expected to foot the bill anyway. It was about years of being invisible until something needed to be signed, paid for, or arranged. It was about learning to stop asking why I was always last and instead asking why I still showed up at all. A minute later, a second group chat appeared. Just the siblings. Red heart. I'd never even known that existed. Rachel must have added me. It was smaller, quieter, only 4 of us. Rachel, me, Elise, and our brother Mark, who lived across the country and barely answered texts. Rachel, I'm sorry again, Isaac. For real this time. I believed Mom when she said you were too busy and probably wouldn't come anyway. I should have known better. Mark, TBH, I didn't even know the cruise was this week until they posted photos. Not surprised they pulled this stunt again. I got forgotten at Thanksgiving. Elise, can we please stop acting like this was some giant conspiracy? You could have just said something, Isaac, instead of nuking the whole vacation. I finally responded. My first words to any of them since the photo. Isaac, you replaced me at dinner before I'd even said a word. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Seen by Elise. No reply. Rachel hearted it. Mark sent a thumbs up emoji. It was enough. 2 days passed. Silence again. Blessed, clean silence. I went for walks. Cooked. I reread old books that still had sand in the spine from my last real vacation 5 years ago. I didn't check the app. I didn't scroll. But I did get one unexpected letter, handwritten. No return address, just my name. The envelope smelled faintly of lavender soap. My mother's signature sent since I was a kid. The note inside was short. I know we crossed a line. I know it's not the first. But this family is breaking and I can't hold it together without you. Please come to the house just once. Let us explain. It didn't say, I'm sorry. It didn't say, you were right. It didn't say, we hurt you. But it said enough. And more importantly, it gave me an idea. I wouldn't go back for them, but I would let them gather on my terms. So, I sent one text to the original Family Trip 2025 group. Isaac, if you want to talk, come to the house Sunday at 3. All of you, one chance. You get 20 minutes. After that, I'm done for good. The typing bubbles began instantly. Dad, we'll be there. Mom, thank you, baby. Aunt Melanie, praise God. Elise, oh, this should be good. Grandma, I'll bring lemon bars. But what they didn't know was that I'd already been preparing for this because that house was mine legally, fully paid off, titled in my name for years. The guest list might have been mine too, but the rules, those were about to change. Sunday came like a courtroom summons. I spent the morning cleaning not the floors or windows, but the energy. I opened all the curtains, let the light in, Made sure every chair in the living room was dusted and neatly spaced, like I was staging the house for a showing, because in a way I was. I didn't cook, didn't light candles, didn't set out drinks. This wasn't a reunion. It was an autopsy. At 2:58 p.m., the driveway filled like clockwork. SUVs, minivans, a dented Corolla with 3 kids in the back. I watched through the upstairs window as they trickled in. Aunt Melanie in another floral blouse that made her look friendlier than she was. Uncle Darren, who probably still thought this was a misunderstanding. Elise chewing gum like she had nothing to prove. And finally, my parents side by side. My mother held a glass dish wrapped in foil. My father had a manila folder under his arm again. They looked nervous. Good. 3:01, I opened the door. No smile, no greetings, just a gesture. A wave toward the living room. Sit. They filed in, murmuring. The air felt strange, like a classroom just before a test was handed out. I waited until every seat was filled. Then I closed the door, locked it, and walked to the center of the room. 20 minutes, I said. That's all you get. They stared. Some looked at each other. My dad cleared his throat. Son, no. I cut him off. Don't start with that word like it still means what it used to. You don't get to lead this. He sat back down, stunned. I turned to the group. Before anyone speaks, I want to read something. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a sheet of paper. It wasn't long, just a list, but it held years. November 2019. You asked me to pay the deposit on Mark's wedding venue. You said I'd be reimbursed. I wasn't. A few people shifted in their chairs. March 2020. You used my credit card for the family cabin trip without asking. When I brought it up, you said it was easier this way. My mother looked down at her lap. August 2021. I was told I wasn't really needed at the family barbecue because there were too many people coming. I found out later the guest list was over 40. Aunt Melanie opened her mouth, but I held up a finger. She closed it. December 2022. Elise posted a photo captioned, "The real family Christmas." I wasn't in it. Elise rolled her eyes. That was a joke. You can defend it later, I snapped. Let me finish. I folded the paper and tucked it back into my pocket. I'm not reading this for pity, I said. I'm reading it so none of you can pretend you forgot. None of this was an accident. This was a pattern. And the cruise. I looked straight at my father. That was the final test. You left me off the list, off the group chat, off the ship, but not off the bill. And then you acted surprised when I canceled it, like I'd ruined your fun. Mom finally spoke. Her voice was trembling. We assumed you wouldn't come. You're always so distant. Distant? I laughed. A sharp, joyless sound. You mean tired? From paying for everything while being treated like a footnote. You never said anything, she shot back. I shouldn't have to, I said louder now. I shouldn't have to beg for inclusion in the family I helped keep afloat. I shouldn't have to remind you that I exist unless you need a credit card. A long silence followed. Then Elise crossed her arms. So what? This was all about money. I stared at her. No, it's about respect. And you lost mine a long time ago. She scoffed. You could have just said no instead of blowing up everyone's vacation. I stepped forward. I did say no. You just never listened. You heard no as try again later. Aunt Melanie jumped in, her tone falsely sweet. Let's not forget we're family. We've all made mistakes. But isn't forgiveness part of that? Funny, I said. That only comes up when you need something. I walked over to the small side table by the TV, picked up a slim black folder, and turned back to them. Which brings me to this. I opened it. Inside is a notarized notice stating that effective immediately, you are no longer authorized to use any account, travel service, or reward point under my name. The joint bank card has been closed. The shared airline mileage plan erased. All linked payment methods gone. I handed the folder to my dad. He took it with a stunned expression. I didn't come here to scream or cry, I said. I came to end this. My mom's voice cracked. We can change. No, I said. You can't, and that's okay. But I don't owe you another chance to hurt me just because we shared DNA. Grandma finally spoke, her voice thin, trembling. What do you want us to say? I looked at her, the only one whose gaze held genuine regret. Nothing, I said softly. I don't want words anymore. I want distance. I want space to build a life that doesn't revolve around being forgotten. Mark, who'd sat silent the whole time, suddenly stood up. I'm staying, he said, voice clear. I felt this too. I just didn't have the guts to say it. He walked to my side. The room shifted. Everyone else just watched. My father stood. Isaac, don't do this. I didn't, I replied. You did. I'm just finishing it. I walked to the door, unlocked it, and opened it. You're free to go. They stood up slowly like it hadn't fully registered, like they were expecting some last-minute twist, a hug, a laugh, a just kidding. But there wasn't one. They filed out. Some murmured goodbyes. Others avoided my eyes. Elise was the last. She paused in the doorway. You'll regret this one day. I met her stare, calm and unflinching. No, I'll regret waiting this long. She left. I closed the door and locked it again. Mark turned to me. You really mean it? I nodded. Yeah. He exhaled slowly. So what now? I looked around the quiet house. Now, I said. We start over with less noise. That evening, we opened a bottle of wine, talked like brothers, laughed, and planned a trip. Just the two of us. No matching shirts, no group chats, no hidden strings, just peace. A week later, I got one more message from Rachel. I left the group chat. Proud of you. I smiled, finally feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Free. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My name's Greg. I turned 52 months ago. I've been a father for 24 years, a husband for 27, and working at the same company for nearly 30. I'm the kind of guy who fixes leaky sinks before breakfast, remembers everyone's birthdays without a Facebook reminder, and has been shoveling our driveway before anyone wakes up since 1998. I never wanted much. Not a big house, not a fancy car, not even a lot of recognition. Just respect. A little appreciation would have been nice, too. But respect, that's the one thing I always assumed I had. I didn't realize how wrong I was until the day I turned 50. Now, my family isn't awful. At least that's what I used to think. We've had our ups and downs like any family. My wife, Carol, and I got married young, had our son, David, a few years in, then our daughter, Emma. I worked while Carol stayed home until the kids got older, and when she went back to work, I adjusted my hours so I could help more around the house. I didn't complain. That's what partners do. Or at least that's what I thought partners did. But somewhere along the way, I guess I stopped being seen as a person and started being the background guy, the wallet, the chauffeur, the man behind the camera who never gets to be in the picture. The morning of my birthday started normal. Carol made pancakes, kind of. They were cold by the time I came down because she'd already left to take Emma to a yoga class. She left me a post-it note with Happy 50th stuck on the coffee maker. No call, no hug, just that note. Still, I smiled. I figured they had something planned. Maybe a nice dinner. Maybe we go out to that Italian place I like. Maybe my son would drive down from college like he used to when he missed us. I still had hope then. That was my mistake. By noon, Carol texted to say, "Don't eat too much. We've got something later." I didn't ask questions. I figured it was all part of the surprise. Around 4 o'clock, I got told to get dressed nice but not too fancy. So, I threw on slacks and a button-up, ironed, clean-shaven, even used the cologne I knew Carol liked back when she noticed those things. Then I waited. 45 minutes passed. No one came. Finally, David called. "Hey, Dad, can you pick up a cake from Mitchell's on your way to Aunt Sandy's? Mom forgot to order one." I paused. "You want me to pick up my own birthday cake?" There was this silence. Then David laughed. "Come on, it's just easier. You're the closest one to Mitchell's, right?" I didn't argue. I picked up the cake. Chocolate ganache with gold trim. Looked expensive and probably was. I paid without saying a word. Drove over to Sandy's, cake in hand. Still thinking maybe, just maybe, this was all a weird setup for a heartfelt surprise. Something cheesy, sure, but touching. Maybe a video montage or even just a toast where someone said, "Hey, Greg, thanks for holding this family together." Instead, I walked into a room decorated like a college frat party. Streamers, party hats, balloons with my face printed on them, poorly cropped, and right there, hanging across the fireplace mantel, was a giant white banner with glittery gold letters that read, "Congratulations on mediocrity." I froze, literally froze in place. My hands were still holding the cake box. I looked around. Everyone was there. Carol, Emma, David, my in-laws, cousins, coworkers laughing, taking pictures of the banner, pointing. Carol was standing under it, doing a silly pose like it was the best joke in the world. I watched her lift her phone and snap a selfie with it, then call over Emma to join in. No one noticed me at first. I just stood there trying to process what I was even looking at. Mediocrity. Is that what I was now? A running joke. When Carol finally saw me, she smiled and said, "Isn't it hilarious?" Emma thought of it. The satire, Dad. Like an ironic roast. You know, 'cause you're so consistent. Consistent. That word has been used to describe thermostats, alarm clocks, not people. David came over and patted my back. "Lighten up, Dad. It's just a joke." I didn't say anything. I walked the cake to the kitchen, placed it on the counter, and started helping set up the drinks. I opened bottles. I poured glasses. I snapped photos of other people posing. I made sure the elderly relatives had somewhere to sit. I even cleaned up when people started leaving. Carol went out for drinks with her sister afterward. Emma left with her friends. David stayed behind long enough to say, "Great party, huh?" before heading out, too. I sat alone in the kitchen afterward. The banner was still up. A half-full glass of warm punch sat near the sink. I cleaned it anyway. That night, I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I went upstairs, packed a weekend bag with some clothes and my laptop, grabbed the envelope with the emergency cash I always kept in the safe. Funny how no one ever remembered it existed but me, and drove off. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. If they couldn't see what they'd done by then, a handwritten letter wasn't going to change anything. I didn't go far at first, just a few towns over. Rented a room in a small inn with spotty Wi-Fi and zero expectations. For the first 3 days, I didn't answer my phone. I let the texts pile up. "Where are you? Did you go to Jim's place? Are you mad about the party? Can you send me the group photos?" That one was from Carol. I deleted every message. A week later, I checked Facebook out of curiosity. That's when I saw David's post. A photo of us when he was 10 at his little league game. I was kneeling beside him, mud on my jeans, grinning like a fool while he held up his trophy. The caption said, "If anyone sees my dad, please tell him we didn't mean it. We love you. Please come home." That was the moment the guilt started to creep in. The quiet, nagging kind. The kind that whispers, "Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe they did appreciate me. They just had a weird way of showing it." I almost packed my bag again. Almost. But then I got an email, a short one from Carol. "No, I miss you. No, we were wrong. Just this. Please let me know when you'll be back. There are bills to sort out." That was the moment something inside me shifted, like a lever being pulled. Something that had been standing still for decades suddenly clicked into motion. And that's when I made the call. The one that would change everything. I called an old friend of mine, Peter. We hadn't talked much over the last few years, but we used to be close. We met back when we were both in our 20s, working warehouse jobs before I moved into operations, and he started his own contracting business. Peter always said I was too dependable for my own good, which I used to take as a compliment. This time, he didn't say hello. He just picked up and said, "About time." We talked for hours. I told him everything, not just about the birthday banner, but about the little moments leading up to it that I hadn't even realized were bothering me. Like how Carol hadn't asked me how my day was in years. How Emma only called when she needed money. How David only ever talked to me about career stuff when he wanted connections. And how my entire existence seemed to revolve around what I could provide. Not who I was. I was a vending machine with a heartbeat. And the worst part, I'd allowed it. Peter didn't tell me to go back. He didn't tell me to leave either. He just said, maybe it's time you stop cleaning up everyone else's mess. That stuck with me. I extended my stay. I didn't reply to anyone. I called in some vacation days. Had plenty saved up, obviously. I took long walks without telling anyone where I was going. Ate when I wanted. Slept without setting an alarm. I even brought a notebook and started jotting down things I wanted to do just for me. Not fix the porch or help Emma with her taxes. Actual things like learn to cook something fancy, take a solo trip, start painting again. Things I hadn't done since I was 25 and still had dreams that didn't involve being an unpaid handyman. Meanwhile, the messages changed. Carol started with concern, "We miss you. Please talk to us." Then they turned impatient. "You're acting like a child." Then practical. "There's mail piling up and the water heater needs checking." Eventually, they went silent. But I wasn't. I started remembering things. How Carol used to doodle in the margins of grocery lists when we were first married. How she once waited 3 hours outside my job to give me a kiss when I had a rough day. Where did that version of her go? Or maybe the better question was, where did we go? Somewhere between raising kids and mortgage payments and just getting through this week. We forgot that we used to laugh, that we used to hold hands even when we were mad. Now she could sit under a banner mocking me and pose for selfies. That's not a bad week. That's rot. Then there were the kids. David used to run into my arms when I came home. Emma used to ask me to tuck her in and tell her dumb stories about talking dogs. They used to listen. Now they barely look up from their phones. When I tried to have real conversations, I got shrugs and half smiles. And yet, I still paid their tuition, still bought their books, still dropped everything when they needed a ride, money, advice, comfort. I was always on call, never off duty, never appreciated. So, I stopped being available. 1 week turned into 2. I finally rented a small cabin upstate. It was nothing fancy. A little place with a fireplace, a creaky porch swing, and a view of the lake. I signed a 3-month lease. I didn't tell anyone. I started writing, not even for anyone else, just myself. I made coffee the slow way. I learned how to roast vegetables. I started painting again, badly, but enthusiastically. I found an old easel in a thrift shop and set it up by the window. I'd wake up at 6 a.m. just to watch the sunrise spill over the lake and try to match the colors with acrylics that smelled like childhood. The silence wasn't heavy. It was healing. One night, after 3 weeks at the cabin, I finally decided to check my email. I had over 300 unread messages. I skimmed through them. Most were junk. A few from work. One from Emma that just said, "Can we please talk?" That one lingered, but what really caught me off guard was a voicemail I hadn't noticed until then. It was from my neighbor, Joe. "Hey Greg, not sure if you're around, but Carol's been having a lot of people over. Pretty regular. Not that it's my business, but I saw a guy leaving the house last night. Thought you'd want to know." I replayed that message 3 times. Not because I was devastated. Honestly, I felt nothing. Not anger, not jealousy, just a kind of quiet confirmation that I'd been running on empty in a relationship that hadn't loved me back in years. If she had someone else over, well, maybe it had been going on longer than I realized. Or maybe she just filled the vacuum I left behind with the first warm body who could turn a wrench. But it wasn't my problem anymore. Still, I decided it was time to take the next step. I called my boss, said I needed an extended leave of absence, maybe even a sabbatical. To my surprise, he supported it. Said I was one of the most reliable people he'd ever worked with, that the office wouldn't be the same without me. I almost cried. It was the first time in years I felt seen. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. Not a text, not an email, a real handwritten letter. The return address was from David's college. Inside, there was just one line. "I'm sorry, Dad. We really didn't mean it. But I think we all need to understand who you are, not just what you do for us." Underneath it was a picture, that same one from Little League. Only this time, David had scribbled over the trophy and written "My hero." That's when I knew I wasn't going back. The same man they thought they knew. The man who poured the drinks, took the pictures, cleaned up the mess. I was done being the background. If I ever returned, it would be on my terms. But before I could even consider that, I got a call from Carol. Tight voice, shaky breath. "Greg, we need to talk. It's about the house." I stayed silent. She exhaled. "I think someone's been stealing from the joint account." I didn't say anything right away. I just listened. Carol's voice on the other end was brittle, like someone trying to pretend they were calm, but barely holding it together. "It's probably just a mistake," she said too quickly. "A glitch or something. Maybe a card got compromised. I don't know, but some of the charges don't make sense. Furniture store, weekend hotel, golf equipment. I figured maybe you." "I haven't used the joint account in weeks," I said, my voice flat. Silence. Then she cleared her throat. "Okay, well, someone has. And it's not me." A pause. A long one. I could feel her trying to put the pieces together while pretending she hadn't already guessed where they might lead. That someone else, someone new, had likely helped themselves to the account I spent decades filling. I didn't ask her how much. I didn't ask who. I wasn't her husband anymore. Not in the way she treated me. I was just the guy who used to fix the garbage disposal and carry the folding tables to the attic after birthday parties. Now I was the guy who left, and she was realizing that behind all her independence and jokes and selfies, she might have actually needed me. "Carol," I said, keeping my voice calm, "you need to call the bank, cancel the cards, change the passwords, and move the money into an account with your name only." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're not going to help me?" It wasn't a question about the logistics. It was about control, about roles, about the old version of me that would have driven home immediately, checked the statements line by line, called the fraud department, and fixed it before she even hung up the phone. "I'm helping you by telling you what to do," I said. "But I'm not coming back to save you, Carol. Not anymore." I could almost hear her swallow her pride. What? What am I supposed to tell the kids? I felt the flicker of something old. Sympathy, maybe. Guilt. But it passed because I remembered that birthday, that banner, that selfie, that smirk. And I thought about how it was me who'd driven David to every early morning SAT class. Me who sat through Emma's dance recital even when she didn't look up once to see if I was there. Me who always cleaned up the wrapping paper while everyone else opened gifts. "You can tell them the truth," I said. "Tell them I got tired of being invisible." I hung up, and for the first time since I was 22, I felt completely free. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because 3 days later, I got an email from Emma. The subject line just said, "I'm sorry." I hesitated to open it. I didn't want another half apology or empty sentiment, but I clicked anyway. Inside was a wall of text. She talked about how at first she thought I was just being dramatic. How Carol told them, "He's probably at some cabin throwing a pity party." And they all laughed. But then the bills started piling up. The lawn was dying. The fridge broke. David's tuition payment bounced. And slowly, too slowly, they realized what I'd been doing all along. "We thought you just liked doing everything," she wrote. "We didn't think about how much work it was or how little we ever said thank you. There were more stories. I didn't expect them." She remembered the time I stayed up all night fixing her science project when she cried because she'd forgotten about it. Or how I used to drive through blizzards just to be at her parent-teacher conferences. Little things, quiet things, the kind no one claps for. "I guess we forgot that you had feelings too," she wrote. "That you weren't just the guy with the credit card and the car keys." She ended with, "Please come home. We miss you. We'll do better. I promise." I sat with that message for a long time, long enough for the sun to go down and for the moon to start reflecting off the lake. And then I opened Facebook. David had posted again, a new photo, a shot of the backyard. The banner was gone. In its place was a homemade sign, hand-painted, crooked letters and all. "Welcome home, Dad. We're sorry." I closed the laptop, and just as I stood up to walk outside and get some air, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my bank. "Alert. Unusual activity detected. Joint account access attempted by unknown device." I stared at the screen, and slowly a smile crept across my face. Because what no one knew, not Carol, not the kids, not even Peter, was that I'd already moved most of the money. Not just to a separate account, but into something bigger. Something I'd been working on quietly in the background for the last few weeks. Something that would finally put me first. Something no one would see coming. I didn't reply to the bank notification right away. I just watched the screen for a few seconds, then locked my phone and walked out onto the porch. The lake was quiet, the sky just beginning to turn that deep indigo that comes before a true night. The air was cool, crisp, like it was telling me to breathe deeper than I had in years. I sat down on the porch swing, the wood creaking under me, and looked out at the water. This little cabin, this pocket of silence, it had become more than a getaway. It was a reset, a space where I'd finally heard my own thoughts without them being drowned out by chores, demands, or just one more thing, Greg. And in that silence, I'd built something. A few weeks ago, after that first phone call with Peter, I had quietly started shifting money out of the joint account. Not all at once, just enough, little by little, to avoid attention. I sold some stock options I hadn't touched in years, cashed in a long-forgotten savings bond, even transferred ownership of the second car into my name before Carol could realize it. I did it not out of spite, but because I knew what was coming. I knew Carol would scramble. I knew the kids would panic. And I knew deep down that if I ever wanted a chance at a different kind of life, a life where I wasn't just Dad the chauffeur or Greg the fixer, I'd have to carve it out myself. So I bought a property. Not just any property. An old lakeside cottage community about 2 hours from the city. 6 cabins total. Most of them run down but structurally sound. The owner was retiring and the price was shockingly low. It was the kind of thing people call a money pit. But I saw potential. I saw freedom. I'd always loved building things. I'd renovated our garage once with my bare hands, rewired the basement, taught myself carpentry on weekends. But this was mine. A place I could fix up, rent out, maybe even turn into a business someday. No one else's dream, just mine. And now, sitting on that porch with my savings safe and my mind clear, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I picked up my phone and finally responded to Emma's email. I love you, Em. I always will. But I can't come home. Not to the version of it we had. If you really want to see me, come visit. Bring your brother. No expectations. No requests, just yourselves. I'll be here at the place I built. For once, I want you to see what I've made for me. She responded an hour later. Just one line. We're on our way. A few days passed. The silence remained, but it wasn't lonely anymore. I started repainting the inside of the first cabin. Soft blue walls, new kitchen tiles. It felt good to be building something that would last, something real, something that wasn't just a temporary patch on someone else's leak. When Emma and David finally arrived, they looked different, smaller, somehow more uncertain. I met them at the dock. Emma ran up and hugged me without saying a word. David looked me in the eye, nodded and said, I'm sorry, Dad, for everything. We talked late into the night. No phones, no distractions, just stories, laughter, some tears. They saw the cabins, helped me clean out the next one. I showed them my notebook, my sketches for renovations, plans for a guest lodge, maybe even a community garden. They didn't ask for money or favors or explanations. They just listened. Carol didn't come. She called once, left a message, said she'd made a mistake, and that things got out of hand, that she missed me, that she wanted to figure things out. I didn't call back. I didn't need to because figuring things out was something I was already doing on my own. And I liked the man I was becoming. Months passed. The cabins started to fill. Travelers, retirees, artists looking for a quiet place. I built a website, started getting bookings. Even Peter came by one weekend to help me install new plumbing. He grinned and said, You finally got out of the background, huh? Yeah, I did. 1 year after the party. That awful, glitter-covered roast. I spent my 51st birthday sitting on that same porch overlooking the lake. No banners, no cheap jokes, just a fresh-baked pie Emma had made from scratch and David standing by the grill, flipping burgers while we listened to old rock music on a Bluetooth speaker. This time I didn't pour the drinks. They brought me one. This time I didn't take the photo. I was in it. And as the sun dipped behind the trees and the porch light flickered on, I realized something. Sometimes you don't need to burn bridges. You just need to stop building them for people who walk over you. I didn't leave my family. I left the version of myself that let them forget I was a person, too. Now on to the next story. Story 7. I gave my sister $500 a week for a year, but on Thanksgiving, she said in public, "You're annoying me. Why did you come?" I was shocked and went away. 24 hours later, she begged. I should have known better. I really should have. But when Karen came to me last year and told me she was struggling to afford college, I didn't even think twice. She was my little sister, and I had always looked out for her. She told me she was drowning in tuition, books, and rent. She said she had nowhere else to turn. Our parents weren't the most generous people. They had always favored Karen, but when it came to money, they were tight with everyone. They never offered to help me when I was in college, and they didn't help her. At least that's what she told me. So I stepped in. I wasn't rich, but I had a steady job. I lived in a small apartment, and I didn't have a lot of expenses. I figured, what's $500 a week if it helps my sister get through school? That's how it started. Every Friday, without fail, I sent her the money. For months, I felt like I was doing a good thing, like I was the responsible one in the family. But then little things started to seem wrong. She never talked about school. No complaints about professors, no stress about exams, no mention of projects or grades. At first, I thought she was just being private. But then, out of nowhere, Joseph, our younger brother, casually mentioned something that made my stomach turn. We were on the phone one night, and he was telling me about some drama at home when he said, "Oh yeah, Karen's place is nice. I mean, she shares it with her friends, but it's a lot better than here." I paused. "Wait, she has roommates?" Joseph hesitated. Yeah. She didn't tell me that. She made it sound like she was having trouble paying the rent on her own. That was one of the main reasons I sent her money. I didn't say anything to her right away. I just started looking more closely. Then another red flag appeared. One night, Joseph and I were talking again, and I asked him about Karen's classes. He got quiet before he finally said, "I don't think she goes anymore." That hit me like a punch in the gut. I pressed him for details, and he finally admitted that she hadn't been going for a while. She had failed a few classes, stopped going altogether, and was probably on the verge of being expelled. That was it. That was the moment I realized I was being played. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to cut them off completely, at least not yet. But I was done being a fool. Instead of $500 a week, I sent her $250. She noticed immediately. Within minutes of sending it, she texted me, "Hey, you only sent $250. Mistake." I ignored it. An hour later, another text, "You forgot the rest." Then another, "Hello." I still didn't answer. She didn't say anything after that. 2 weeks passed. Every Friday, I sent her $250, and every Friday she remained silent. I figured she got the message. I had no idea what was coming. Thanksgiving was 2 weeks away. I wasn't planning on going home that year. I had nothing against the holiday itself, but I had learned that family gatherings usually meant unnecessary stress. But then Joseph called me. "Come on, man. It's just one dinner." So I went. Big mistake. When I got there, everything seemed normal. Mom was carving the turkey. Dad was setting the table. Joseph was fiddling with his phone. For a moment, I thought maybe I overreacted. Maybe Karen just needed time to cool off. Then Karen came downstairs. She didn't greet me. She didn't even look at me at first. She walked straight into the living room, sat down on the couch, and then said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Why did you come at all? You annoy me." The room went silent. I just stared at her, thinking maybe I misheard. She scoffed, "No one invited you." I looked at my parents, waiting for them to say something, anything, but they just kept carving the turkey like it was nothing. I didn't say a word. I just grabbed my keys, turned around, and walked out. Not one person tried to stop me. 24 hours later, Karen was at my door with my parents. I didn't expect to hear from Karen after what happened at Thanksgiving. If anything, I figured she'd spend the next few weeks bad-mouthing me to our parents, maybe send a few passive-aggressive texts before finally moving on. I was wrong. The next evening, just as I was settling in for a quiet night, I heard a loud, insistent banging on my apartment door. Not the knocking kind. The kind that made my neighbors stop whatever they were doing to listen. I had a feeling I already knew who it was. I opened the door and there she was, Karen. And right behind her were our parents. Karen pushed past me like she owned the place. Mom followed, shaking her head in exaggerated disappointment. Dad lingered in the doorway for a second before stepping inside, closing the door behind him like it was some kind of intervention. I didn't say a word, just crossed my arms and waited. Karen dropped onto my couch as if she had been personally inconvenienced by my existence. Her expression was sour, irritated, as if I had done something to her. Then she finally spoke. She didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge anything that had happened the day before. Instead, she demanded to know when I would send her the rest of the money. That was the moment I realized how deep her sense of entitlement ran. She actually believed that I owed her, that I was obligated to send her money just because she decided she needed it. There was no gratitude, no acknowledgement that I had helped her for a year, just an expectation that I would continue. When I told her the payments were over, she scoffed as if I was joking. She didn't even look concerned, just annoyed. My parents weren't any better. They acted like I was being cruel, like I had done something terrible by deciding to keep my own money. Mom told me that Karen needed support, that it was my responsibility as her older brother to help her. Dad nodded along, already bored with the conversation. That's when I laid it all out. I told them that I knew about the roommates. I knew she had lied about living alone. I knew she hadn't been to class in months and was about to get kicked out. I told them how Joseph had been the one to let it slip. The response wasn't what I expected. Karen didn't look embarrassed or caught off guard. She just rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. Mom barely blinked. Dad sighed and mumbled something about how it wasn't a big deal. That was when I really understood how deep their favoritism ran. Mom actually defended her, saying that she was a girl and needed help, that she wasn't built for the same struggles I was, that it was easier for men to make money, so it wasn't fair for me to hold it against her. It was like something out of a bad sitcom. Karen just sat there with her arms crossed, waiting for me to cave, as if this was a small fight, and I'd give in as soon as I calmed down. That's when I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and canceled the automatic transfers right in front of her. As soon as she realized what I had done, her face contorted with rage. She jumped up from the couch and screamed that I couldn't do that I had no right. Mom gasped as if I had just committed some unspeakable crime. Dad sighed, already tired of the conversation. Karen kept demanding to know what she was going to do like it was my problem. I told her she could figure it out like the rest of us. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Mom gave me a long, disappointed look before following her. Dad just shook his head, mumbled something, and left without another word. I locked the door behind them and sat down, feeling lighter than I had in months. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. But Karen wasn't done. Not even close. I thought that was the end of it. That Karen would pout, complain to our parents, and eventually move on. Maybe she'd find another way to pay her bills. Or maybe she'd actually get a job for once. Either way, I was done. But Karen wasn't going to let things go that easily. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of messages. Some from her, some from Mom, some from numbers I didn't even recognize. I ignored them at first, assuming it was the usual guilt trip. But when my phone kept buzzing every few seconds, I finally gave in and checked. Karen was furious. She went from demanding that I fix this to insulting me in rapid succession. She called me selfish, ungrateful, a horrible brother. She said I had no idea how hard she had it and that I was ruining her life for a little money. Mom's messages were even worse. She told me that Karen cried all night, that she didn't know how she was going to pay the rent, that I had abandoned my own sister. She kept repeating the same thing. Family takes care of each other. The numbers I didn't recognize? Karen's friends. She had actually told them that I refused to help her. And now they were messaging me on her behalf, calling me names, telling me I was a bad brother. One even had the nerve to say that it was my responsibility as a man to take care of the women in my family. It was so ridiculous that I almost laughed. Instead of replying, I blocked every single number. That should have been the end of it. But later that evening, just as I was about to go out for groceries, I opened my apartment door and almost walked right into Karen. She was standing there with her arms crossed, looking like she hadn't slept. Behind her, Mom was rubbing her temples as if the whole thing had exhausted her. Dad was nowhere to be seen. He probably didn't want to deal with it at all. Karen wasted no time. She told me I had one last chance to make this right, to send her the money and stop being so petty. She didn't even ask at this point, just expected me to agree. As if this was a minor inconvenience, and I was just being stubborn, I told her no. She didn't take it well. She started ranting, pacing up and down the hallway, listing all the things she needed money for. Rent, food, bills, unexpected expenses. She said she didn't have time to get a job because she was too busy. When I asked what she was doing, she waved me off as if the question didn't matter. Mom chimed in and said I was being unnecessarily cruel. That Karen was family and I had an obligation to help her, that I had more money than she did, so why did it matter? That's when I told them the truth. I wasn't as well off as they thought. I wasn't struggling, but sending Karen $500 a week had added up. Over the past year, I had given her $26,000, more than enough to cover whatever she needed. I told her that I had to put my own life first, that I couldn't just keep giving her money while she did nothing. Karen didn't care. She called me selfish, told me I didn't love her, that if the roles were reversed, she would have helped me, which was a complete lie. I asked her one last time why she didn't get a job. She finally snapped. She admitted that she had a job, but she quit after 2 weeks because she hated it. She said the work was stressful, that she wasn't cut out for it, that she deserved better. She even said she felt I owed her because I was the oldest. That was it for me. I told her in no uncertain terms that I would never send her another dime, that she needed to grow up and figure things out for herself. Karen didn't say another word. She just stormed off, pushing past me on her way down the hall. Mom gave me one last disappointed look before following her. I closed the door and locked it behind her. I didn't know what would happen next, but I had a bad feeling that this wasn't over yet. For the first time in a long time, my phone was silent. No messages, no missed calls, nothing. Karen had gone completely silent. I expected more tantrums, more attempts to manipulate me, maybe even another surprise visit. But instead, she disappeared. No texts, no voicemails, not even vague social media posts calling me out. It was eerie. And for a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, she had finally realized she needed to take care of herself. Then Joseph called. He usually didn't call unless something was really important. So I picked up. His first words made my stomach drop. "Dude, Karen's moving back in." I sat up straight. "What?" "Yeah, she's back with Mom and Dad. Just showed up yesterday with her stuff. Mom says it's temporary, but I don't know, man. It's Karen." I sighed and rubbed my face. So that's what her silence was about. She hadn't figured things out. She just found a backup plan. Joseph continued. "She's been complaining non-stop since she got here. She keeps saying it's your fault. Mom and Dad obviously let her do whatever she wants. You dodged a bullet, dude." I didn't even know what to say. I should have been relieved that she wasn't my problem anymore. But I knew exactly what was coming next. A week later, I got the call I had been waiting for. "Mom." I let it go to voicemail, but a few minutes later, a text came through. "Call me. We need to talk." I already knew where this was going, but I called back anyway just to get it over with. She didn't even say hello before she jumped in. Karen needed to come home, but their house wasn't big enough for 4 people. They weren't willing to fully support her, and Dad was getting frustrated. And then she said the words I knew would come. "If you're not going to send her money, at least let her stay with you for a while." I actually laughed out loud. Mom didn't appreciate it. She said Karen just needed a few months to get back on her feet, and it wouldn't be fair to let her struggle when I had room. I asked if Karen had even looked for a job. Mom hesitated before finally admitting she's still adjusting. Adjusting? Karen had been living rent-free for a week, doing absolutely nothing, and now they were going to dump her on me. I shut that down immediately. I told Mom there was no way Karen was moving in with me. If she didn't want to work, that was her problem. Mom didn't take it well. She accused me of abandoning my family, said I was being cruel and selfish, and that I was holding a grudge over a few unkind words at Thanksgiving. I hung up. That should have been the end of it. But when I came home from work the next day, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Karen standing outside my apartment with 2 suitcases waiting. I stood there for a few seconds just staring at her. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was just standing outside my apartment like she belonged there, as if it had already been decided. The suitcases told me all I needed to know. She wasn't there to ask if she could stay. She had already decided to move in. I walked past her, unlocked my door, and stepped inside without saying a word. She grabbed one of her suitcases and tried to follow me in. I blocked the doorway. Her expression changed to instant frustration. Seriously? I asked what she was doing here. She scoffed and said, "Mom said you'd let me stay. She told me to just come over and get settled in." I almost laughed. I told her in no uncertain terms that she wasn't moving in, that I had already told Mom no, and that it was crazy to show up unannounced with suitcases. Karen didn't flinch. She rolled her eyes and muttered something about me being ridiculous. It was as if she had expected resistance, but thought I'd give in eventually. She even tried to go in again. I didn't move. She sighed dramatically and crossed her arms. Where else would I go? I told her it wasn't my problem. She scoffed. You have the space. It's not like you have a roommate or a girlfriend or anything. Why do you even care? I told her I cared for my peace, for my sanity, for not being manipulated into taking care of an entitled adult who refused to get a job. She hated that answer. Her voice got louder. She said I was pathetic for leaving my sister out in the cold, that I was selfish for not helping my family. She even had the nerve to say, "It's just until I figure things out." I asked her if she had even tried to get a job. She made a face as if I had just asked the dumbest question in the world. Mom and Dad said, "You take care of things." That was it. That was all I needed to hear. I stepped back, grabbed the door and said, "Then go to them." And I slammed the door in her face. She didn't slam it. She didn't scream. She just stood there for a second, probably in shock. Then I heard her muttering angrily to herself before she grabbed her suitcases and stomped off. I should have felt bad, but I didn't. An hour later, Mom called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, angry. She said Karen had come home hysterical, that I had humiliated her, that she couldn't believe I would treat my sister like that. She even threw in, "I didn't raise you to be so heartless." I listened to the whole thing and then deleted it without responding. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept like a baby. But I wasn't stupid. I knew Karen, and I knew this wasn't over. I thought Karen showing up at my apartment with suitcases was the worst of it. I thought it was her last desperate move before she finally accepted reality. But Karen always had one more trick up her sleeve. A few days passed in silence. No texts, no calls, nothing. It was almost too quiet. Then, out of nowhere, I got a notification that my bank had flagged an attempted transfer of $500. I hadn't sent any money to anyone. I checked the details and my stomach turned. The wire request had come from Karen. Somehow, she had saved my account information from all the times I had sent her money before, and she was actually trying to withdraw another $500. As if she was entitled to it. I immediately called my bank, closed the account, and changed everything. New passwords, new security settings, even a new account. Then I sat there staring at my phone, waiting for her to contact me and try to explain herself. She never did. Instead, Mom called. I let it ring. She called again and again. Then a text. "Karen told me you locked her out of the account. She needs the money. Richard, call me now." That was it. That was the moment I knew there was no fixing this family. I called her back, not to argue, just to say one thing. I told her I was done with Karen, with them, with all of it. I told her I wasn't going to be manipulated or guilt or robbed ever again. That Karen wasn't my responsibility. That I didn't owe them anything. And that from that moment on, I was cutting them off completely. Mom started to scream. She called me selfish, cruel, ungrateful. Said I was leaving my family for a little money. Said I'd regret it. I hung up in mid-sentence. Then I blocked her. Blocked Dad. Blocked Karen. It was over. A few weeks passed. My life got quieter. My phone didn't explode anymore. No more surprise visits. No more guilt trips. No more entitled demands. It was the most peaceful I had felt in years. Then Joseph called. I hesitated for a second before answering. He was the only one I hadn't blocked, the only one I actually trusted. He sounded casual, as if nothing had happened. After a bit of small talk, he suddenly said, "Hey, so I was wondering, can I borrow $5,000? I almost dropped the phone. You're joking, right?" There was a long pause. Then Joseph burst out laughing. "Dude, you should have heard yourself. I got you so bad." I sat there stunned for a second, then started laughing too. He got me. For a split second, he actually got me. We talked for a while, and before we hung up, he said, "For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Mom and Karen are still mad, but Dad really doesn't care. He barely talks about it. Karen is unhappy, though. Apparently, she actually had to get a job. Shocking, right?" I smiled. Not my problem anymore. And for the first time in my life, I really meant it. Update. It's been about 6 months since I cut ties with Karen and my parents. And I have to say, life has never been better. My bank account isn't bleeding $500 a week. I don't get guilty texts every few days, and I no longer have to deal with Karen's endless entitlement. But just when I thought I had heard the last of her nonsense, something unexpected happened. Joseph called me out of the blue. We still talked here and there, but this time his tone was different. He wasn't joking or teasing me. He just said, "You're going to want to hear this." Apparently, Karen's situation had gone downhill since I cut her off. In fact, she had to get a job, one that she obviously hated. But here's the kicker. She ended up moving out of our parents' house because even they got tired of her. At first, they had no problem letting her stay rent-free. But when Dad got fed up with her constant complaining, he told her she had to start contributing either by getting a better job or paying rent. She threw a fit, said it was unfair, called them selfish. Sound familiar? Long story short, Karen tried to manipulate them the same way she did me, and it didn't work. She thought they'd cave. They didn't. So, she did what she does best. She found a new target. Joseph told me that Karen had moved in with one of her friends. The same ones who used to text me and call me a horrible brother. The same ones who swore they'd always support her. And guess what? They kicked her out after 2 months. She didn't pay rent, didn't help with bills, treated their apartment like a free hotel. They soon got tired of it and told her to leave. And here's the kicker. After burning every bridge she had, Karen actually tried to reach out to me. I checked my blocked messages later and saw an unread text from a new number. It was Karen. She didn't apologize. She didn't admit she was wrong. She just sent a message. "Hey, I know things got messed up earlier, but I really need a place to stay for a while, just until I figure things out." I stared at it for a second. Then I deleted it without answering. Joseph laughed when I told him. He said, "Yeah, I figured she'd try. I guess you're her last option now." Not anymore. I made my decision 6 months ago, and I have no regrets. Karen made her bed. Now she has to lie in it. Now on to the next story. Story 8. You're a total selfish mom. I shouted at the table, while brother laughed. And then I said, "Let's see who will pay your mortgage." Mom didn't believe me, but their faces turned pale when "You're a totally selfish person," my mom yelled across the dinner table. Adam, my brother, laughed and shook his head like it was all a joke. I just sat there, gripping my fork, feeling the familiar weight of frustration settle in my chest. It was her birthday. I had taken her to a nice restaurant, paid for everything, even bought her a present. I didn't expect much in the way of thanks. Gratitude wasn't exactly her strong suit, but I also didn't expect to be torn apart the second I said something she didn't like. "I can't help with the mortgage anymore," I said. "I quit my job." Silence. Then my mom blinked as if I had spoken another language. Adam's grin faded. "You've got to be kidding me." I wasn't, and honestly, I should have done this a long time ago. I'd been covering my mom's mortgage for the last 8 months. Not helping cover. I also sent her extra money every month because, as she liked to say, family has to help family. That was her favorite line. She would pull it out whenever she needed something, and Adam, of course, backed her up every time, especially when it came to his own bank account. For $1,000. That's how much I'd sent him for his self-improvement courses. He claimed he was working on bettering himself, but I never saw any proof. No books, no certificates, no real effort. Just vague comments about investing in himself, while he sat around waiting for me to foot the bill. And for years I did. That was the worst part. I let it happen. I was the responsible one, the one who got good grades, the one who worked through college, the one who got a solid job right out of college. I never asked for help because I knew there wouldn't be any. But the minute I started making good money, I suddenly had an obligation to help. At first, I didn't mind helping my family. It felt like the right thing to do. But then, it stopped feeling like help and started feeling like an obligation. Every month, they expected more. If I said no, my mother would guilt me, remind me of all she had done for me, tell me I was ungrateful. And Adam? He just went along, nodding his head in agreement, happily taking whatever I gave him. But quitting my job? That wasn't part of their plan. In their minds, I was supposed to work endlessly, keep paying, never complain. The idea that I might actually want to keep my own money was unthinkable. I wouldn't even leave them high and dry. I was willing to pay the mortgage for one last month. That was reasonable, right? 1 month to give them some time to figure things out. But of course, it wasn't enough. It was never enough. My mother scoffed. "You're being ridiculous," she said. "You know what will happen if you don't help." Adam leaned forward and shook his head. "You're seriously going to screw us like this? You know I still need your help. I'm trying to do something with my life and you're just going to drop everything?" I actually laughed because the irony was incredible. He was acting like I owed him something, like I hadn't already sacrificed thousands of dollars for his so-called future. "Let's see who pays your mortgage," I said calmly, staring straight at her. Her face twitched. She still didn't believe me. "You wouldn't do that," she said. "You're not that kind of person." Something inside me snapped. I grabbed my jacket and got up. "Good luck," I said, and walked out of the restaurant without looking back. For 2 weeks, nothing. No calls, no texts. It was the longest silence I had ever received from them. Then, just as the next mortgage payment was due, my phone rang, and that's when things got completely out of hand. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't constantly buzzing with my mom's guilt trip or my brother's fake concern masking yet another request for money. No reminders about family obligations. No passive-aggressive texts. Just quiet. I should have known it wouldn't last. The morning the mortgage payment was due, my phone started ringing. Mom's name came up. I let it go to voicemail. She called again, then again. On the 5th call, I finally picked up. She wouldn't even let me say hello. "Where is she?" I stretched out on my couch. "Where's what?" "The mortgage payment, Jack. It was due today." I didn't answer right away. I wanted to see how long it would take her to answer her own question. Took 3 seconds. "You were serious. You're actually not paying." She sounded more puzzled than angry, like she really thought I was bluffing. "I told you," I said. "Last month was the last." A pause, then she let out a dry laugh. "I thought you were just throwing a temper tantrum." A tantrum? That was what she called it, like I was a spoiled child refusing to share his toys instead of an adult finally setting boundaries. I sighed. "Mom, I don't have a job. I won't send you any more money." Her voice sharpened. "So what? You're just going to let us lose the house?" I let that sit for a second. Let them lose the house? As if the last 8 months of mortgage payments I'd covered didn't exist. As if it wasn't their house, their responsibility. "You had 2 weeks," I said. "You should have come up with something by now." She scoffed. "Oh, don't give me that. 2 weeks isn't enough time. You have savings. You could help if you wanted to." And there it was, the assumption that my money was just a shared family fund, that my hard-earned savings weren't mine but a backup account for when she needed it. Then she dropped something new. Well, if you won't help, someone else will. My boyfriend will step in. I sat up straighter. Boyfriend? I knew she was seeing someone, but I had never paid attention. She had gone through a lot of short-term relationships, none of them lasting long. His name is Mike, she said. And he actually cares about this family, unlike you. I almost laughed. And what? Is he going to start paying your mortgage now? Not yet, she admitted. But he wants to talk to you. I knew where this was going. No thanks. Before I could hang up, her voice went cold. Let me be clear, Jack. If you don't help, he's going to get involved. I had no idea what that meant, but I was about to find out. The next day, Mike showed up at my apartment. I wasn't expecting a visitor. It was late afternoon and I had just gotten back from the gym when I heard a knock. Loud and patient. Not a casual knock. More like someone expecting me to open the door right now. I checked the peephole. A guy I didn't recognize was standing there. Tall, maybe late 40s, built like someone who used to go to the gym but had let himself go a bit, bald, sheep leather jacket, the kind of face that always looked on the verge of smirking. I knew who it was before he even opened his mouth. I opened the door but didn't open it all the way. Yeah, Mike, he said, like that should mean something to me. When I didn't answer, he added, your mom's boyfriend. We need to talk. I exhaled through my nose. I don't think we do. He grinned. Are you going to invite me in? Nope. His grin twitched. All right, we'll do it like this then. He crossed his arms, shifting his weight as if to settle in. Your mom's upset. She's stressed, and frankly, I don't blame her. You're leaving your family in a really bad place, kid. I leaned against the doorframe. She told you that I pay her mortgage, right? And that I told her months ago that I wouldn't do it forever? Mike shrugged. She told me you left her and your brother. You got your big job, made your money, then left her high and dry. I laughed, really laughed. She told you that? That's what I know. No, he corrected, squinting at me. Because I see reality, Jack. Your mom is hurting, and you're sitting here in your nice apartment living your life while she's wondering if she'll have a place to sleep next month. I stared at him for a moment. She sent you here to shake me down, didn't she? Mike scoffed. Nah, man. I volunteered. I wasn't sure if that was better or worse. Listen, he said, lowering his voice as if he wanted to sound reasonable. I get it. You want to do your own thing, be independent. That's great. But this isn't just about you. Your mother needs stability. Your brother's trying to build a future. And you, he pointed at me. You're the one in the best position to help. I was done. Not my problem. His expression darkened. Yeah, see, that's the thing. It is your problem. I tilted my head. How do you figure? Mike took a step toward the door. Because if you don't step up, I will. And you're not going to like the way I do things. That caught me off guard. Excuse me? You think I don't know what you do? I do. He tapped his temple. And I know exactly how much you saved. Your mother showed me the bank transfers. You've got a lot. So either you help or... He trailed off, but the implication was clear. I stared at him. I was truly stunned, not just by the audacity, but by the threat. Then I smiled. You said my mom showed you my wire transfers. Mike grinned as if he had won. That's right. Cool, I said. That's illegal. The grin slipped. And since I never gave her access to my accounts, I continued. I'm guessing she either went through my personal information without permission or lied about why she needed the money. Either way, I'd like to see what my bank has to say about this. Mike's face twitched. Look, kid. I cut him off. You got 10 seconds to get out of my house before I call the cops. 9. He hesitated. 8. His jaw tightened. 7. He turned and walked away. I waited until he was completely down the hall before I closed the door. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with adrenaline. Because this wasn't just a family drama anymore. This was something else, something uglier, and I had a feeling it wasn't over. Something about Mike's visit stuck with me, not just the threats, but the fact that my mother had actually shown him my bank transfers. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, wondering how long she had let this guy pry into my personal business. By morning, I had decided I wasn't going to let it go. But when I stepped outside and saw my car, My stomach sank. Left front tire flat, slashed actually, and above the driver's side door, a deep, jagged scratch from a key. I didn't have to guess who'd done it. I took a slow breath, forced myself to stay calm, then pulled out my phone and called my mom. She answered on the second ring, as if she had been waiting for me. Before I could say anything, she sighed dramatically. "Oh, so now you want to talk?" "My car got trashed," I said flatly. "Flat tire, key door. You want to explain that?" She didn't even try to deny it. "Well, maybe next time you'll think twice before making your family suffer." I gritted my teeth. "This is how you handle things now? Sending your boyfriend to threaten me and then trashing my car?" She scoffed. "This is nothing. If you don't fix this, it's going to get worse." Something inside me snapped. I hung up, opened the trunk, and went to work. All the while, my mind was racing. My hands were steady as I replaced the spare, but my pulse was pounding. They wanted to scare me. They wanted me to break. Not happening. 30 minutes later, I was in the car speeding toward my mom's house. I had no plan. I just knew I was done playing defense. As I pulled into the driveway, I barely had time to turn off the engine before the front door swung open. My mom stepped out, arms crossed, looking bored like I was the unreasonable one around here. Then, behind her, the screen door creaked open and Mike appeared. But that wasn't all. Adam was there too. And he wasn't alone. There was another guy, someone I didn't recognize. Leaning against the porch railing, arms covered in tattoos, watching me with a grin. At that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about money anymore. They were waiting for me. As soon as I got out of the car, I knew something was wrong. My mom was standing on the porch with her arms crossed, a smug look on her face like she had already won. Mike was next to her, grinning like he was enjoying a private joke. Adam leaned against the door frame, avoiding eye contact. But it was the other guy, tattoos, buzzcut, about my age but rougher, that really set off alarms in my head. I had no idea who he was, but he was watching me too closely, as if he was waiting for something. I closed the car door and walked up the driveway. "All right," I said. "Who's the extra?" Tattoo guy grinned but didn't answer. My mom did. "This is Ryan," she said, like that explained everything. "A friend of the family." Mike chuckled. "He helps out when people won't listen." "Ah, so this was an intimidation thing. Cute." I crossed my arms. "So let me get this straight. You slashed my tire, keyed my car, and now you've got some hired goon trying to scare me?" Ryan actually laughed at that. "Hired goon? That's funny." Mike stepped forward. "Nobody wants this to get ugly, Jack. But if you don't start cooperating, it's going to get worse." I stared at him. "Worse? You're playing a dangerous game, kid," he said. "You've got money, you have savings, and you think you can just walk away and leave your family in the gutter." He clicked his tongue. "It doesn't work that way." I glanced at Adam, who was still hanging back near the door, shifting uncomfortably. "Are you okay with this, Adam? You really co-signed this?" He hesitated, then muttered, "You're the one making this hard, man." I let out a slow breath. "Wow, okay." I turned back to my mother. "So what's the plan here?" "I start paying again and all this magically goes away." Her expression didn't change. "You should want to help your family. You have the means. The whole situation is your fault." I laughed. I really laughed. "My fault? I have been paying for everything for months. The second I stop, you bring in reinforcements to beat me up." Ryan snorted. "Nobody's roughing anybody up. But things break. Accidents happen. It'd be a shame if your car got totaled next time." There it was, the full threat. I tilted my head and stared at him. "Did you do this yourself? Or did mommy's boyfriend help?" His smirk twitched. "Which do you think?" I nodded slowly. "Good to know." Then, I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my phone, and held it up. The recording app was open. The timer, 3 minutes and 12 seconds. Dead silence. Mike's eyes narrowed. "What's that?" I smiled. "Oh, just a little insurance." I turned up the volume and hit play. "You have money, you have savings, and you think you can just walk away and leave your family in the gutter. Click. It doesn't work that way. Click. Accidents happen. It'd be a shame if your car got totaled next time. Ryan's smirk disappeared. Adam turned pale. Mike's expression darkened. My mom, she even looked nervous. I put the phone back in my pocket. So here's what's going to happen, I said. You're all going to back off. No more calls, no more visits, no more accidents. Because if anything else happens to me, my car, my apartment, hell, even my mail, that recording goes straight to the cops. Mike clenched his jaw. You wouldn't do that. You sure? I raised an eyebrow. Because I'd like to see what the cops think about a bunch of threats, financial exploitation, and destruction of property. I nodded at Ryan. Especially from your new little boyfriend. Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it. I exhaled. We're done here. I turned and walked back to my car and got in. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of them in the rearview mirror. My mom angry, Mike stone-faced, Ryan looking at the ground, and Adam, he was just standing there, staring at me. I didn't know what was going through his mind, but in that moment, I didn't care. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. For the first hour after I left my mother's house, I was shaking with adrenaline. My fingers were tight on the wheel, my mind racing with everything I could do to make them pay. I had enough to ruin them. I could take the recording to the police, have Mike arrested for making threats, maybe even have Ryan investigated. I had no idea what he was up to, but he didn't seem like the kind of guy to keep his hands clean. I could expose my mom for financial exploitation, drag Adam through the mud, burn every bridge they had left. They had used me, milked me for money, guilt me, and when I finally said enough, they turned on me like I was the bad guy. They slashed my tire, keyed my car, sent a thug to intimidate me, and now they were afraid. For once, I had the power. And yet, the longer I drove, the more I realized something. I didn't really care about revenge. Revenge meant staying involved. It meant giving them more of my energy, my time, my thoughts. It meant that even if I won, I'd still have to deal with them. And I was so tired of dealing with them. So instead of planning how to get even, I started thinking about something else, something bigger. What if I just left? Not just my apartment, not just the city, but everything? By the time I pulled into my parking lot, the decision was made. I was leaving and I wasn't coming back. I went inside, grabbed a suitcase and started packing. Clothes, essentials, my laptop, the things I actually cared about. The rest didn't matter. Then I made the important phone calls. First, my landlord. I told him I was moving out immediately, breaking the lease, and paid the fee without a second thought. He didn't even ask why. Next, my bank. Locked everything down, new passwords, fraud alerts, extra security. If my mom had been snooping into my finances before, she wasn't going anywhere near them now. Then I wiped my social media clean, deactivated accounts, removed contacts, cut any digital thread that could lead back to me. By nightfall, I had booked a one-way ticket. New city, new state, somewhere near the ocean, because why not? The next morning, before I left for the airport, I sent Adam one last message. Tell Mom to stop calling. I'm done. Don't try to find me. Good luck. Then I blocked his number, blocked all her numbers, and that was it. As I sat in the airport waiting for my flight, a strange sense of calm came over me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel obligated to fix anything. I wasn't carrying someone else's problems. I wasn't waiting for the next guilt trip, the next demand, the next financial drain. I was free. As the plane took off, I looked out the window and smiled. They could call me selfish, they could hate me, they could tell themselves whatever lies made them feel better. I didn't care, because for the first time in years, my life was mine. I landed in Los Angeles with nothing but a suitcase and the feeling that, for the first time in my life, I was actually free. The moment I stepped out of the airport, the warm air hit me, salty from the ocean, thick with city life. Palm trees lined the streets, the skyline stretched endlessly, and everything felt new mine. I found a small apartment in Santa Monica, a short walk from the beach. It wasn't much. A tiny kitchen, creaky floors, a landlord who returned texts 2 days late, but it had a balcony. Every morning, I drank my coffee out there, watched the sunrise paint the ocean gold, listened to the waves crash instead of my mother's voice demanding money. I got a job. Not a stressful corporate job like before. Something easy. Something that paid enough to cover the rent and let me enjoy my life. No more breaking my back to pay for other people's lifestyles. One night, about a month after I moved, I was sitting on the sand watching the waves when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something inside me was curious. I answered. A pause, then a familiar voice. Jack. Adam. I didn't say anything. He let out a slow breath. Mom's losing the house. I looked out at the ocean, the moonlight stretching over the waves. Okay, I said. Silence. Then, that's it. Yeah, I said. That's it. I hung up, blocked the number. Then I got up, dusted the sand off my jeans, and walked home. For the first time in my life, their problems weren't my problems, and it felt damn good. Now on to the next story. Story 9. Sister-in-law threw soup in my face because I refused to pay for her vacation. I calmly left and stopped paying for everything, and now she is begging me on her knees. But Sunday dinner had become a routine. Me, my husband Jim, our son Mark, and his wife Brittany. I make a nice meal and try to keep things pleasant, but Brittany always had a way of making the evening about her. This night was no different. We were halfway through dinner when she began. You know, she said, putting down her fork with a dramatic sigh. Mark and I have been so overwhelmed lately. We really need to get away somewhere tropical. Maybe, but the prices are just crazy. I continued to eat, hoping she'd go on, but she didn't. The flights alone are outrageous, she continued. I mean, it would be so nice if somebody could help us out. You know, just this once. I looked at her and then at Mark, who nodded as if her idea made perfect sense. Brittany, I said, keeping my tone even, we already help you with so much. A vacation isn't something we can justify. She didn't even blink. But you could if you wanted to. It's not like you're struggling, is it? And Mark and I never ask for much. That made me laugh, but not because it was funny. Brittany, who do you think pays your rent, your car insurance, and half the stuff you order online? Her face darkened. So you're saying no? She said, her voice colder now. I'm saying no, I confirmed. The table fell silent, except for the sound of Jim chewing softly. Brittany leaned back in her chair, looking at me as if I were the villain of the piece. Then, out of nowhere, she grabbed her soup bowl and threw it at me. Hot soup splashed all over my face, the heat stinging my skin. I was too shocked to move. Jim broke the silence, but instead of defending me, he looked at Brittany and said, "You didn't have to do that." Then he turned to me. "But Linda, you didn't have to be so difficult." Mark put his head down and said nothing. Brittany crossed her arms and smiled, looking like she just won something. I stood up, wiped my face with a napkin, and grabbed my bag. Without another word, I walked out. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring out the window. I could still feel the sting of the hot soup on my face and the weight of Jim's words. You didn't have to be so difficult. Difficult? After all I'd done for Mark and Brittany, I was difficult for saying no to their endless demands? When Jim finally came downstairs, I didn't wait for him to start his usual small talk. "I'm done," I said, my voice firm. He blinked at me, halfway through pouring his coffee. "Done with what?" "Everything. I'm not paying her rent, groceries, car insurance, or any of her other bills anymore. Not a dime." "Linda, you can't just do that," he said, looking genuinely stunned. "Mark and Brittany depend on us. How are they going to make it without our help?" "They depend on me," I corrected him, staring at him. "And they'll figure it out. They're adults. It's time they started acting like it." He started to argue, but I cut him off. "Jim, she threw soup in my face, and what did you do? You defended her. You called me difficult. If you're so concerned, you can pay for her out of your golf budget." That shut him up. That night, I called Mark to tell him my decision. When he picked up, I didn't give him a chance to ease into the conversation. "Mark," I said, "this is just a heads up. Starting next month, Your father and I will no longer be paying your rent or any of your other expenses. It's time for you and Brittany to be on your own." "What?" he stuttered. "Mom, you can't just—" "I can," I interrupted. "And I am. You're married now, Mark. You have responsibilities. It's not my job to finance your life." There was a long pause, and for a second, I thought he might apologize or at least acknowledge how out of hand things had got. But instead he said, "Brittany is not going to like this." "She doesn't have to," I replied. "Goodbye, Mark." And I hung up. I spent the rest of the evening feeling a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, and an odd sense of relief. For the first time in years, I put my foot down. But I knew Brittany wouldn't take it lying down. Sure enough, a week later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, there she was, standing on the porch with red-rimmed eyes and a forced smile. "Hi, Linda," she said sweetly, as if the soup incident had never happened. "Can we talk?" I stood there for a moment, staring at Brittany on my porch. Her tone was sugary sweet, but her eyes had a slight edge to them, as if she wasn't used to grieving and wasn't happy about having to do it. "Can we talk inside?" she asked, looking over her shoulder as if she didn't want anyone to see her standing there. I stepped aside without saying a word, and she walked in, her heels clicking on the floor. She looked around as if hoping for Jim to back her up, but he wasn't home. "Linda, I just wanted to apologize," she started, but it felt rehearsed. "Things got a little heated at dinner the other night, and I overreacted." I crossed my arms. "Overreacted? You threw soup in my face, Brittany." She winced, then quickly recovered. "I know, and I feel terrible about it. That's why I'm here. I wanted to make things right." "Making things right would start with an apology," I said, raising an eyebrow. She hesitated, her cheeks flushing. "I just said I feel terrible," she said, her tone bordering on defensive. "But you have to understand, Linda, I was under so much stress, and when you said no to the vacation, well, I snapped. You know how hard it was for me. Couldn't believe it." Even now, she was trying to make herself the victim. "Brittany," I said slowly, "you don't seem to understand what you've done. For years, I've bent over backwards to support you and Mark. Rent, groceries, bills, things the two of you should have been handling on your own. And the moment I set a limit, you threw a tantrum like a child." Her face hardened, but then quickly softened, her voice dropping to a pleading tone. "Linda, please don't stop helping us. We need you. Mark's job barely covers the basics, and with everything going up in price." "That's not my problem," I said firmly. "You and Mark chose to get married. You chose this life. It's not my responsibility to finance it." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a second, I thought she might actually break down. Instead, she knelt on the floor, her hands clasped in front of her as if begging. "Please, Linda," she said, her voice breaking. "We're going to lose the apartment without your help. Just until we get back on our feet." I swear, it was a pathetic sight, and despite my anger, I felt a twinge of compassion. But I didn't show it. "I'll think about it," I finally said. "But things will never be the same. If I decide to help, it will be on my terms." She nodded quickly, as if she'd take anything at this point. But as she stood and smoothed her dress, I noticed something. She hadn't really apologized. Not for the soup, not for the years of entitlement, not for any of it. When she left, I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the empty space across from me. Part of me wanted to believe she'd finally learned her lesson, but deep down, I knew Brittany too well. This wasn't over. After Brittany's visit, I knew I couldn't let things go back to the way they were. The next day, I called Mark. "Mark," I said, "I've decided I'm willing to help with the shopping for 3 months. After that, you and Brittany are on your own. I won't be paying rent or anything else." There was a long pause before he finally said, "Okay, but Brittany is not going to be happy." "She hasn't apologized to me yet," I replied, "so I'm not going to discuss it with her directly." He mumbled something and hung up. I heard nothing from them for a while, which only made me more suspicious. A week later, Jim came home and told me that Mark and Brittany had invited us over for dinner. "They want to make amends," he said. Amends? I asked, raising an eyebrow. We'll see about that. When we arrived at their place, everything was set up perfectly. Candles, a spotless apartment, and a very cheerful Brittany. Dinner started well, but it didn't take long for Mark to join in. Mom, he said, we really appreciate everything you've done for us, but we were hoping you'd reconsider helping us with the rent, just for a few more months. No, I said simply. My decision hasn't changed. Brittany's smile stiffened. But that's not enough, Linda. You're leaving us with no options. You have options, I replied. You're both adults. It's time to figure it out. She glared at me, her fake sweetness slipping away for a moment. The rest of the dinner was tense, and as Jim and I drove home, he finally said, maybe you were too hard on her. I didn't even look at him. Then help them, I said. But I'm done. And that's when I realized that the rift between Jim and I was deeper than I had admitted. The days after that dinner were quiet, but not in a peaceful way. Mark and Brittany didn't call, and Jim avoided the subject entirely. I knew the silence wouldn't last. Sure enough, Jim came home one night and dropped a bombshell. I've been thinking, he began, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. Maybe we should pay the rent for a little while longer, just until they find a new place. I stared at him, the calm I'd been holding on to slipping away. Jim, are you serious? After everything that's happened? After what she did? They're struggling, he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. What kind of parents just leave their kids hanging? They're not kids, Jim, I snapped. And this isn't about helping them. This is about enabling them. I've been the one paying for everything while you sat back and let me do it. Now that I've said no, you want to swoop in and play hero. His face darkened. That's not fair. Fair, I repeated. Fair was me paying her expenses for years without a single thank you. Fair was me walking out of that dinner covered in soup while you defended Brittany. And now you think I'm the bad guy. We argued in circles for the better part of an hour. Jim couldn't or wouldn't see my side. By the end, I was exhausted and fed up. I can't do this anymore, Jim, I finally said. Not with them, not with you. If you want to keep supporting Mark and Brittany, go ahead. But don't expect me to stick around and watch. What are you saying? He asked in a low voice. I'm saying I want a divorce. The words hung in the air, heavier than I'd expected. Jim looked stunned, but I felt nothing but relief. This had been building for years, and now it was finally out. He tried to talk me out of it, but I'd already made up my mind. For too long, I had put everyone else's needs before my own. It was time to put myself first. As I packed a bag and prepared to stay with a friend for a while, Jim sat quietly in the living room. For the first time, I saw the cracks in the life I'd been holding together, but instead of feeling sad, I felt free. After I left, I moved into a small rental about an hour away. It wasn't much. A small one-bedroom with dated cabinets and creaky floors, but it was mine, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Jim and I hadn't talked much since I'd left, and I hadn't heard a peep from Mark or Brittany. I assumed they'd gotten the message. Then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was Brittany. I almost didn't answer it, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello. Hi, Linda, she said, her voice strangely soft. I was wondering if we could get together. I have something I'd like to talk to you about. I hesitated. What is it, Brittany? It's hard to explain over the phone, she said quickly, but I promise it's important. I sighed, torn between shutting her down and hearing her out. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her the next day at a coffee shop near my apartment. When she arrived, she looked different, less polished than usual, almost nervous. She ordered coffee, sat across from me, and started talking before I could even get comfortable. Linda, first of all, I want to thank you for meeting me, she began. I know things have been tense between us. That's one way to put it, I said dryly. She smiled awkwardly and continued. I've been thinking a lot about how I've treated you, about how Mark and I have handled things, and I want to say I'm sorry. I raised an eyebrow. You're sorry? Yes, she said, nodding. I realize now that we took advantage of your generosity, and I don't blame you for cutting us off. I probably would have done the same in your place. Her words sounded sincere, but I knew Brittany well enough to be cautious. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. She took a deep breath. I've come to ask you for one last favor. After this, I promise you'll never hear me ask for anything again. I crossed my arms. And what would that be? She looked out the window and hesitated. A car, she said finally. I blinked. A car. Yes, she said quickly, her words tumbling out. Mark and I have been trying to make ends meet, but our car broke down last week. We can't afford to fix it, let alone buy a new one. And without a car, it's going to be impossible for me to get to work, for Mark to get to job interviews. This is the last thing we'll ever ask for, Linda, I swear. I stared at her, trying to process what I had just heard. After everything, she had the audacity to ask for a car? Brittany, I said slowly, do you realize how that sounds? You're sitting here telling me you're sorry for taking advantage of me, and then you ask for something else. I know how it sounds, she said, looking genuinely confused. But I mean it. This is the last thing. If you do this for us, I'll never ask for anything again. I'll even sign something if you want me to. I didn't say anything for a long time, and she shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Finally, I sighed. I'll think about it, I said. Her face lit up. Thank you, Linda. You have no idea how much that means. As she left, I sat staring at my coffee, wondering if I'd just been played again or if, for once, Brittany was actually being honest. For 4 days, I struggled with Brittany's request. A car was a big ask, and part of me wanted to say no, but I thought of Mark. He wasn't innocent in all of this, but I knew he would struggle without reliable transportation. In the end, I called Brittany and told her to meet me. When we sat down, I got right to the point. I've decided to help, I said, but here's the deal. It'll be a used car in my name, and you'll take care of the insurance and maintenance. If you miss payments or neglect it, I will take it back. This isn't a gift. It's a chance to get back on your feet, and it's the last thing you'll ever get from me. She nodded quickly, agreeing to everything. A week later, she and Mark had a modest used sedan. As I handed her the keys, I looked her in the eye and said, "Don't make me regret this." She promised not to, but as I drove home, I couldn't help but wonder if I had just opened the door to more of the same. A few weeks went by after I helped Brittany and Mark get their car, and things were strangely quiet. Too quiet. No updates, no thank yous, nothing. It wasn't like Brittany to stay silent for long, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then, out of the blue, I got a message from an old neighbor who lived near her apartment. "Hey Linda," the message said. "I just saw Brittany driving a shiny new SUV. I guess things are looking up for her. Thought you'd like to know." I read the message twice, convinced I had misunderstood. A new SUV? After all, where in the world did they get the money for that? Curiosity got the better of me. The next morning, I decided to drive by their apartment to see for myself. When I pulled up, there was a spotless, brand new SUV parked right out front. It gleamed in the sunlight, almost mocking me. I looked around for the modest used car I just helped them buy, but it wasn't there. My stomach sank. Later that day, I texted Mark. "Where's that car I helped you get?" I asked bluntly. His reply came quickly. "We traded it in for the SUV. Brittany got a great deal. Don't worry, the payments are manageable." I stared at the message, stunned. Traded it in? After all the pleading about how much they needed help? For a moment, I couldn't decide whether to laugh or scream. Brittany had promised that this was the last thing she'd ever ask for. But now it seemed she'd already twisted my help into something else entirely, just as I'd feared. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.